Okay. Welcome, everyone. Sorry for this slight delay. Please let it be noted that we met in executive session to discuss matters concerning the appointment of a particular person or persons, collective negotiations pursuant to Article 14 of the Civil Service Law, and pending or current litigation. I would like to start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Flag is over here. Please rise. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
There we go. Sorry. Liberty and justice for all. Okay. So we would like to start tonight by acknowledging that our superintendent is joining us remotely, which we really appreciate. It's taken a bit of a Herculean effort to get him here, and we're really grateful. So, Peter, without further ado.
Thank you. Yes, thank you very much. I just wanted to, very short tonight.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
I'm making my second mistake of the night. In addition to muffing the pledge, before we get to your report, we have the approval of the minutes first. I apologize.
Go for it.
So, I'd like to make a motion on the approval of the minutes from August 27th, 2020. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Questions or comments?
Yes, I had asked for an additional amendment to the minutes today after viewing the video. In the first sentence, after pointed out, including but not limited to the fact that the contractors picked up the RFP for the EPC.
I'm so sorry, Marianne. I can't hear you.
So
I know it's rare.
but it's the mask. I know. It's the mask. I have this problem in closings. So I had asked for an additional change to the minutes about the EPC. I had been emailed out this morning. I had viewed the video this morning, and I had asked for additional language to be put into it about what was said at the prior meeting, specifically concerning the RFP process for the EPC and the EPC. I believe you all received that email, which said, including but not limited to the fact that the contractors picked up the RFP for the EPC, but did not bid on the RFP due to the air conditioning portion of the contractor's bid and achieved the same energy savings at half the price without the air conditioning portion, that the payback for the air conditioning portion is 130 years, and that it was unfortunate that the architects who are receiving a fee of nearly $500,000 under the EPC were the ones who were supervising the RFP process. So I had asked for that to be put in. I had previously asked for the reference to the newsletter that I had provided, the bond referendum newsletter that did not reference the EPC to be put in. Betty had asked me to get specific language. In order to do that, I had to view the video, which is why the comment went out this morning. So I'm asking for that additional language to be put in.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I'd like to make a motion that for the duration of the pandemic, as defined by when the school is operating under some modified educational plan, that trustees limit their changes to the minute to factual errors or to substantive changes to the tone of the minutes that are made prior to when the revised agenda comes out. That's the motion. My discussion would be.
Well, hold on. So a motion has been made. Do I have a second for the motion? Then we'll have discussion on the motion itself. Is there a second on Sarah's motion to,
It's just a second for the.
just a second to facilitate the conversation of Sarah's? So then discussion, Sarah?
Yeah.
Can I just ask a question? Are we able to consider that motion without considering the
Right.
motion to approve the minutes?
Well,
I mean, we
made a
could-
comment, and now you're making a motion over my comment? I don't.
No,
I
in
like,
addition-
No, it's just-
the
no,
revised
it's not
minutes
that,
only
it's
came
just
out
a-
this morning.
I'm just, my question is just procedural.
So I'm going to ask
That's
Betty
all.
that question. So we had a motion to discuss the minutes, and then we seconded that, so now we're in discussion of the minutes. Marion had a comment on the discussion of the minutes that was then followed, but not a motion to add that. And then Sarah had a motion to change the nature of the minutes.
No, well, my
Well, I made
comment
a-
was a motion to change. I didn't specifically say a motion, but I had asked for it. So I'm making a motion to add my comments.
Well, we got to resolve the previous.
Again, we already
motions
have a
before
motion on the
there's
table,
Another
so-
motion then.
So we have 3 motions.
We have one motion that has been seconded, and now we have a discussion on that motion. Correct, 2 motions.
So you're just going to go over me, Sarah, because you don't want to hear what I have to say. To
Hold
you
on,
in the
hold on.
minutes.
We are not
Because
going to
this is
devolve, we're going to
really-
follow
this is
process here.
really Unbelievable.
We are going to follow process here.
here.
I think the way I would like to discuss this is all of us discussing the nature of minutes. Sarah's motion is about the nature of minutes. We can't have a discussion about a specific comment that a motion was not made upon over a motion that has been made.
You've
No.
never asked anyone formally to make a motion when they've wanted something added to the minutes.
Every time,
Every
That is-
single time.
Marianne, you are-
No,
you
that's not
follow
true.
these minutes. Every time there is a change to the minutes, a motion has been
It
made.
is a motion to amend. It is inherently, you must make a motion to amend.
Well, that was the nature of what I was doing. It's a motion to amend. You all know what I was doing. So now you want to change the conversation. Every time I want to amend the minutes to include what was actually said about this EPC, you block it. And that just tells me and the public everything we need to know, that you don't want the accurate information about what I said. Whether you agree with it or not is irrelevant. What I said is what I said,
Hold on.
and I would like the minutes to actually reflect what I said.
Point
We
of
have all
order.
sorts of garbage in there, word for word, about what other people say that's
Point
not
of
even
order.
relevant in the minutes.
Point
But
of
what I
order.
say, obviously,
Marianne, you
doesn't
can't
matter.
filibuster.
Point of order.
Yes.
We need a decision on what the procedural, what happens procedurally, according to Robert's rules, happens at this point. I'm happy to comply with that, but
So-
I'm unclear on it.
What my understanding of what happened is you made a motion that was seconded about discussing the nature of minutes. That discussion of the nature of minutes will include an answer to Marianne's comment and question. We're literally discussing what you want, Marianne, which is whether or not the nature of minutes for this board should be a recitation of everything that was said at the will of individual trustees, and if that's truly what we want minutes to be. That is the conversation that we are having. If we determine as a result of that, that that's what we want as a board, that we would vote down Sarah's motion, and we then have the opportunity to entertain a formal motion submitted by you in the exact way that you want it, and we would then proceed from there. But the conversation we're having right now is whether or not minutes are going to be an opportunity for individual trustees to make sure that the points they make verbatim can be included.
I find the way the.
Marion, you
Really
had plenty of
selective.
time to comment on this. There are 7 trustees up here. I have spoken, you have spoken, Sarah has spoken. I'd like to hear from some other trustees, as is our protocols for functioning as a board.
Functioning.
Are there any other comments from other trustees about the nature of minutes and what they should be?
So what has been the precedent in the past?
The precedent, to my understanding, has been that this is not a verbatim recording of all that is said. It has been a recording, as per Robert's rules, of action items and general discussions. That's the precedent.
But I am not clear as to whether this in fact is just a verbatim piece. I mean, it's a specific item. It's not the entire piece that was discussed. So I have a little problem with that characterization of it.
So legally, the minutes need only, and this is the advice, the minutes need only record the legal actions of the board, which would be the votes. We have historically, by precedent, included commentary because we felt it was in the interest of transparency and provided more information to people reading the minutes. We now, of course, also have the video, which is, of course, a transcription of some kind. We could decide to go with the law, and the minutes could strictly record the votes of the board. We have been fortunate that we have had a consistent third-party recording of everything, including public comment, right? If you only record the legal actions of the board, you lose a lot of things. You lose the discussion, you lose public comment. We've been fortunate that we've had a consistent recording of some sense of what the entire meeting was. We now have the video. We could decide just to record the legal motions of the board, and anyone who wanted more information could watch the video. My argument is, ironically, to continue to discuss what exactly the written minutes should contain. It's not the purpose of the board.
Other comments from the trustees?
I would consider going forward after this meeting, everything that you've noted in terms of what should be in minutes, and that for further explanation, people can refer to the video, which I've never had before, as long as the video is very, very clear and well produced. Because in the past, we've had videos where the audio is absolutely unintelligible to the public. And are we ADA compliant? I'd like to have that confirmed. Does the ADA require us to have a transcription of the video?
I was just going to ask the same thing. I have no problem with what Lisa said as long as there's a written transcription, because it's much longer to watch a video versus read the transcript.
The videos are closed captioned when they're posted.
Right, but that's different than a written transcription.
We don't transcribe meetings.
Very
Right.
different than a written transcription.
And other than the
Closed
past
caption
couple of
doesn't always get it correct.
right, and other than the past couple of times, when I brought it up, we've always granted trustees who brought up issues, even on the day, especially when the revised minutes just came out this morning, to grant. It's just, it's unprecedented that you are not adding what I've now asked to add, and that you didn't add it at the last meeting. I can't even.
The number of additions are also unprecedented.
I would,
Trustees have generally been very accepting of the minutes. We all know that everything that we said is not reflected in the minutes. The minutes are clearly a much more concise summary. Any one of us could easily make arguments about things that weren't said, but we choose not to.
This seems very important to Mary Ann. So I think we should consider revising the minutes because it's obviously something that means a lot to you. And then moving forward, maybe we consider adopting Sarah's approach as long as there's a written transcription.
I understand what you're saying. I'm sorry.
This is all time and money. That's money.
I would say that we are a board of 7. We act as a board. This is not about individual trustees and horse trading amongst us to satisfy us in certain areas. I think in terms of precedent and in terms of difference, the reason we're having this conversation and the reason that these minutes have not just simply been added is because there has been a consistent, over the past several meetings, growth in the requests of individual points that have been made up that you feel the need to make sure are reflected specifically in the minutes. And to me, as a trustee, I would say to Andrea's point, I feel like I've given that to this point, and I now feel like it's gone, for me, too far.
No, because I didn't get the changes I wanted in the other minutes. So if the points were made, they were not put in the minutes. So these are important points, and it's I don't understand when there's a video why you would not want to put it in the minutes. I think it's outrageous, and I'm asking you to put them in. I'm making a motion to put these in. If you want to move forward, then I think it needs to be applied equally. It seems to me that we're very selective about who we want to quote word for word, because in the original discussion in the June 18th minutes, much of what I said was not put in. I asked for one sentence to be put in the June 18th minutes. It was not put in. No one would put it in. And then other additions were made, and we have word for word verbatim statements made by other trustees and by administrators. But yet, when I asked for one sentence, Dave, one sentence to be added to June 18th minutes, it was not added. So please do not tell me that I have been out of line on this. It's really unbelievable, and it smells bad to me, and it smells bad to the public, I'm sure.
I'm willing to say I disagree. As someone who speaks, I speak extensively at these meetings. I know for a fact the vast majority of things that I say at these meetings are not recorded in the minutes. I think that is appropriate. I think that is entirely acceptable. I do not think it would be appropriate for me to spend this board's time and the public's time arguing that everything I say, or even anything I say that didn't make it into the minutes, should be done unless there was an error in fact. That is why I, who have absolutely spoken extensively at these meetings, am not making a motion to amend the minutes.
I agree with Trustee Jones's position on this. While I understand that your point that you feel like this is outrageous because what you want is not being included in the minutes, I think that Trustee Jones raises the larger point that while we all, as individuals, may want every precious word that we say, or at least the highlights of what we say.
That is a complete mischaracterization
I am in the
of
middle
what
of
I am
speaking,
saying.
Marianne. You cannot interrupt someone when they are in the middle of speaking. That's just the way we function as a board.
But you're mischaracterizing what I said.
And when I'm done, you can have a chance to do that, because I am literally in the middle of saying in my allotted time that I feel you've mischaracterized the position of this board, that it's not a persecution against you, that your voice is not able to be reflected in the minutes. It is a statement of the fact that we rely on Betty to keep these minutes in a way that has been done in a consistent way for years, and that of late there has been a push by you to tip the scales too far in the direction of including your specific points that the board is now reacting to. That is how I see it, and that is the end of my comment on this. And at this point, please.
That is a total mischaracterization. When I asked for one sentence on June 18th to be added, you did not add it. And on a discussion that was probably 6 or 7 paragraphs long. So if you had done what I asked you to do on June 18th as a courtesy, as we routinely do for other trustees as a courtesy, we wouldn't be having this discussion now.
The June 18th minutes were amended at your request to include several sentences that you wanted. That is a factual statement.
They
It
did
may not have included
they
the exact
did not
statement,
include my statement.
but you can't say that you wanted one. You simply asked for one statement and we didn't put it in there. You asked
I asked
for
for one
much more.
statement on the June 18th. The other one I asked for, on June 18th, I asked for one statement that was not included in there.
Are there other comments on this, on Sarah's motion?
My point is just, I cannot, in good faith, approve other trustees' amendments to the minutes without including all the additional comments that all the trustees made to those minutes. I say we go one way or another. We go with just the motions in the video, or
Well,
the motion.
I would like to
minutes
suggest-
are as they are, without factual errors.
Did Tim want to say something?
Tim, did you?
Well,
want
what I was going to say
Yeah,
with
please.
regards to Mary Ann's proposed amendment is to vote on the amendment, and then we can vote on whether or not, if we approve that amendment, to table the minutes to decide if something else should be added that somebody else wants added to those minutes,
So,
from what they said.
so I'm on the same page with you. Here's how I think we should do that logistically. And Betty, you're the parliamentarian here, or I think the closest thing we have. So what I would like to do personally in this discussion, I would recommend voting no on Sarah's resolution. Move on from that. Let Marianne make a resolution on her request to add a specific language, which I would also recommend voting no upon. And then at that point, I think we should make a motion to table the minutes, as Tim said, clear up this additional discussion. And then we are having a board retreat, which we can discuss our processes as we do. And that's a good place, I think, to discuss without taking the public's time and seeing this acrimony in an appropriate way, which I've spoken with the lawyers, and they say it's fine to have this conversation in a retreat.
What I would suggest, I mean, I agree more or less with one exception, is in that I'm inclined to vote yes on Marianne's amendment, and then looking at it, keeping that in there. She put the wording down, she watched the video, she said she watched the video, and I trust her on that, and that's the language that she would like, and that we approve that, and then table the minutes, the full minutes, with that revision in it, so that others can propose amendments if they choose to. And they can email Betty and say, I said this and I would like that included. I do agree with Sarah and Lisa, and I think to make this decision at this time is a little bit out of order. But going forward, the minutes are becoming a political document, and I'm not targeting any. I'm just saying in general. And if you look at our minutes and you compare them to any other board, whether it is a village board, a town board, or any other school district, they are there's so many statements, and it's just nothing. There's nothing like it. Every other board has minutes that just reflect votes, action items, general discussion items. I was looking at minutes today from another district where it just simply said the superintendent gave a presentation on the reopening plan. No details on it. You can go and watch the presentation if you want to watch it. But they are so detailed, and that's not Betty. Betty was given that direction to do that, and I'm sure 10 years ago, minutes weren't like that. It was just basically, you're going through the agenda. Did they vote yes on this? Did they vote no? Who voted what on each item? And that's it. That's what minutes are. We have a video of every meeting, and as you said, make sure it's clear. And these points have already been made. These are not my points, but it was what Sarah and Lisa were saying, and that's the way minutes should be.
Tim makes terrific point, right? Like, that is really the context. That makes tremendous sense to me. But to vote on these minutes in any way now, right, to say Marianne invested time in watching the video and wants something added, whereas the rest of us did not invest time in watching the video and looking at what should be added. The rest of us invested time in the facilities tour, for example, last night, which, was like 4 hours. There's something that was the point of my motion, is like, this is not the place to put time. And to say, yes, you spent time watching the video and you want to add a sentence from the video, inherently puts everyone else in a very different place that spent their time, considerable time, in trying to make these schools ready for reopening, instead of watching the video to like add sentences to the minutes. That's not tenable to me. That is not okay in any sense.
Betty, if I may ask you a question, and it's only a procedural question. Do we have to act on Sarah's motion, which has been made and seconded, before we go back to another discussion?
You table it.
James, are you still on?
Please, attorney.
For the public that's watching, we hope we have our attorney in the. So James, if you could just give us a little primer here on Robert's rules.
I wish I could. You have, this is very unusual, I think. But it seems to me you have Sarah's motion that's pending. And it's up to you if you want to vote on it or if you want to table that. But I think that's the first thing that's pending.
Okay. So I guess the question is, Sarah, do you want to withdraw the motion, or do you want to have a vote on this motion? I'm asking you because you have the right to withdraw the motion.
I agree. Is there some further discussion on withdrawing the motion that you?
I just say,
wants
I
to
think
put
the
on?
motion is out of order at this particular time, but the motion's been seconded. I mean, one of us should have declared it out of order when it was first. When I say it's out of order, just in the order of the meeting.
I
That's all.
understand.
I don't mean I think it's an appropriate motion at some point.
Had I
Just-
thought
just not
of it
at-
earlier, I would have tried to figure out.
And so, I don't know, vote to table it, and then we can,
Okay. So I'm going to make a motion to.
I
Sorry.
appreciate Tim's input on that. I myself will make a motion to table it.
Okay. Do I have a second on the tabling of Sarah's
I will
motion?
second.
Seconded
Table.
by Trustee Makari. All those in favor of tabling Sarah's motion, say aye.
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 Unanimous. We will now, Mary Ann, you want to make a motion to
I
amend the
wanna make
minute?
a motion to amend the minutes, as I previously stated, and which was emailed to all the trustees this morning, to make the addition that was outlined in my email and which I stated earlier.
This morning?
This morning, it was emailed out this
Mhm.
morning. When the revised minutes came out, I reviewed the
On
revised
Tuesday?
minutes, then I reviewed the video, and then I sent the revisions that I wanted after reviewing the revised minutes, which came out this morning.
All right, so
So-
the minutes came out on
Hold on,
Thursday?
She's made a clear motion. We can discuss the motion. I
You're
want to have a
correct.
second
Sorry,
on the
hold on.
motion. Is there a second on Mary Ann's motion?
Second.
Second.
So we now have a second on that. In terms of the timeline, the draft agenda came out with the minutes last Thursday. At that time, Mary Ann had asked for a change in the minutes. On Tuesday, we got an initial change on the minutes, which went through. And then this morning, there was an additional change requested, the one that you're making a motion to change now.
After reviewing the revised minutes.
Correct. Is there any additional discussion of this,
The second revision.
adding the second revision to these minutes? Sorry, Lisa?
No, I'm good.
Okay, you're so close to me. It's, I can't tell if you're just looking at me or you have a question. Okay.
I mean, I don't have an issue with the timing of the amendment. I mean, it would have been better if it came earlier, but trustees have made amendments at meetings before. So just as a matter of following precedent,
I
I
understand.
don't see, it's what we have done that.
From the timing we have, although
Pepper?
previously this year, we did table minutes because a very similar situation
Right.
happened. So we have a precedent also of.
So,
not
and
approving.
that's what I'm proposing,
Yes.
is that, I mean, whatever your view is on the amendment, vote on that, and if it's approved, the amendment is approved, then table the full, we're just voting on an amendment. We're not voting on the full amendment, on the full minutes. Then vote on tabling the full minutes so others can review it, and if they want something added from what they said, then they can add it. And we can vote on the minutes at the next meeting.
Just to
Yeah, please clarify.
follow up on that discussion, I think if we're voting on adding them to the minutes, they then become part of the permanent record. So other folks would then have to, they become part of the minutes we'd be amending. It would then potentially, if the next motion, we're lining up our motions here, if the next motion gets approved to table them, we would then have the option to add
Yes.
or
Right.
potentially undo as well and change again.
Yes.
As we discuss it further, is like what we want minutes to be. Because for me, the issue is, I think we've reached a point, as you very well said, where the minutes have become too much. They have not become a simple outline of what's happening here, but they've become too much. I think in the terms of baseball, we've gone way beyond the play-by-play and we're far into the color. And I think that's a little too much. That said, I think we've laid our path out, Sarah.
I want to be clear. We're going to first vote on Marianne's motion to amend
Motion to amend with the language that she read
with her
previously.
language. You can vote yes on that or no.
Correct.
If that, well, regardless, that motion passes or not, we will then vote on the amendments, or someone may make a motion to table.
That is correct. We will still be in the discussion phase. We will then be discussing the newly amended motion, the newly amended minutes.
And someone may wish to make a motion to table because given that we're expanding the amendments to include other comments, other trustees may also wish to spend their time reviewing the video to make sure we have a full and complete context.
It's up to the person who makes the motion, but I would say that the motion should include to give trustees more time, not just to go back and take our time to review the video, if that's what we so desire, but also to have further discussions and thoughts about the nature of minutes and whether we want the minutes to be what we've just amended them to be.
I think that's a separate topic about what you want the nature of the minutes to be, and it shouldn't be wrapped up into the amendment. There should be a motion. I made a motion to amend the minutes. We should have a vote on it. Then if you want to have a discussion item about the minutes, you should make a motion to put it on a new agenda.
The motion will be the motion.
Can I make a suggestion?
Please.
A point of clarification. I think Marianne's motion is to amend the draft minutes because those have not been approved. So you should be clear about that. So
Okay.
that the pending motion is to amend the draft minutes, and then you can discuss it, and then you can decide if you want to approve the minutes as amended or table that.
So to clarify for Betty, who's going to take minutes of this minutes conversation, we have a amendment proposed by Trustee Russo to amend the draft minutes pursuant to the language that you read previously. And if we do this, we will then be in a discussion phase. But the draft minutes, which we will then be discussing, will officially include that language. Is there any other discussion of this before we vote on Trustee Russo's motion? All those in favor of Trustee Russo's motion to amend the draft minutes as such, say aye.
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 All those opposed? Nay.
No.
I think that's 7.
I voted in favor. Yeah.
So now is there discussion of the amended draft minutes, which now become the draft minutes?
I move that we table the minutes, the draft minutes.
Second.
Any questions or comments or discussion on
I give the
that?
second to Lisa.
Oh, sorry, Lisa seconded.
Lisa was the second. I think I just believe given the timing of the changes that we should table it to make sure all the trustees actually review it. It's just, we're all have a lot to do. And that's, given the timing, that's the fair thing to do.
I agree, and I look forward to not having any more of these conversations. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the draft minutes are tabled. And Peter, we are ready to move on to the superintendent's report.
Thank you very much. So my report will be very brief tonight, in so much as it is we have spent the last several months really solely focused on, or almost solely focused on, the opening of school, which happened today. Unfortunately, I had I'm obviously not on campus today, which is not ideal. But I have heard from principals today and from the assistant superintendents today that the day was amazing, despite the rainy start. Last night we did our facilities tour with the board, and I was really excited to show you guys around and have you take a look at all the precautionary things that we put into place. But I think I heard more than once last night, which was actually pretty heartwarming, was that it looked like regular school, and that was always the the North Star for us. So sure, we have sinks, and sure, kids are in masks, and sure, we're going to have lots of canopies, which I think are a great addition. It was totally worth it. And so now the most important objective for everybody is to follow the very simple rules: wear your masks, wash your hands, stay socially distanced, and if we are really careful, I think we can make a real run out of this. So I will look forward to getting into some schools and hanging out with some kids in short order. But it is a big weight to be relieved to have kids back. Terrific day.
Thank you, Peter. Is that your report?
That is my report for today.
I am struck by how much time we have spent talking about procedural stuff, but I do want to speak to the whole board that although if anyone in the public is watching this, the discussion we just had about minutes and about procedure is important. I think it's also important to mention that all of us are here because we care about the students of this district, we care about this community, and our first priority is the kids of this district. And that what we as a board didn't do it. We as a board certainly had our questions and had our oversight as is appropriate, and certainly authorized a lot of the spending and the facilitation of what happened. But the administration did a tremendous job putting this together. The teachers have done a tremendous job. The entire staff of this district has put their feet forward in an unprecedented situation, and I think it's important to realize that is our focus. I remember when I was in graduate school, we interviewed Joe Volpe, who was the former director of the Metropolitan Opera House, came and spoke to a class. And I remember one of the questions I asked him was, is it more satisfying to do all the prep work to get it ready, or do you find it more enjoyable to sit there when the curtain goes up? And he said, of course, once the curtain goes up, he's almost bored. He cares more about putting it all together and seeing the pieces go together. Today, when I dropped off my kids and I saw the people flagging the cars in the pouring rain, I saw the signs they had made, I saw our assistant principal and our principal soaking wet in their suits with their smiles, shepherding those kids into our buildings, I think it's the opposite of what Joe Volpe was talking about, and that it is the actual pulling it off and seeing those kids' faces. And although I'm not going to talk about my kids a lot in this role, having them come home and having a great first day and experiencing all the benefits of being back in school and being in a school environment and learning again was emotional. And I think that's important. So I appreciate what Peter talked about today. I appreciate redirecting the focus toward the district and the kids. And I think, again, thank everyone who, all 800 members of our crew and our staff here who put this all together. It's really important. Thank you.
Can I add to that?
Thank you.
Okay. I just want to say, last night we were on a facilities tour. Ms. Watsy was there, Dr. Zublionis, Dr. Giarizza was there, I was there, as were trustees Vizza, Lemma, Madden, and McCary. 4.5 hours to go through all of our schools. We do this every year, and every year, I think we're always astonished by the fact that, like, the floors are literally sparkling, shiny, clean. The classrooms are just a jubilant expression of happiness and learning and everything that these schools are about. But last night, to go on that tour, and all the building principals were there to walk us through their buildings, which I cannot say how much I appreciate. But the extent to which we should appreciate the facilities and the custodial staff. Mm-hmm. And I see trustees nodding. I think Trustee Vizza is going to want to speak to this too, I suspect. To see those same sparkling floors, but now on top of everything else, the social distancing markers on literally the floors of every single hallway in every single building. How they manage to accomplish all of the changes that we needed to have for a reopening today. And I am not saying the reopening did not have hitches and complications and the rain did not help. But I was I'm always floored by how ready our buildings are, but last night was like something I've never seen. And I just think it's really important that we all say how grateful we are to the people that actually did that work, because I am sure it was literally endless. Like the number of details that we were talking about is endless. And trustee, because I know you're nodding, and I just suspect you may.
No. I was truly impressed with
Lisa, I'm sorry, just pull it in.
Oh.
It's,
the
thank you.
I don't know, the building principals supported the teachers. I mean, administrators, they thought out of the box where they were placing classrooms, even making changes to certain spaces because of sound considerations. Any conversation we had, it was all directed to how is this going to benefit the kids? And that's what it's all about. That's really, really what it's all about. And I came away feeling very comforted with the fact that our kids were going to show up today in what you said looked like close to their normal classroom. Everything was spaced well. The classrooms felt breezy and open. It's just incredible. And the number of people who are still there, still doing the last minute touches. And not just, I mean, they were teachers, you know, from people from the nurse's office and attendants. And it was incredible. And they were walking by, so they weren't dragging. They were smiling and thanking us. And, you know, I want to thank them. I mean, our role almost is easy. They had to put the plan in action and solve problems on the fly with not great direction at times, or switching directions. And Peter can attest to this and the frustrations that can occur from that. But I think we all wanted to give a group hug to every
Yeah.
head custodian last.
Yes,
Yeah.
we did, yes, but we're not allowed.
We did a virtual one, but I just need to thank every single person that put in the effort.
I have to say, I have to echo the same thing. I left sort of embarrassed that I had not given much thought to the amount of work the custodians had undertaken over this time. I kept thinking about the teachers and the principals and the superintendents. I had not really considered the custodians, and I could not help but think about them last night. It was unbelievable. They are the unsung heroes, I
And
think,
one of the
this
buildings was
district.
short of a custodial staff
Yep.
member, and
Yeah,
then one
it
of the
was-
bigger
it-
elementary schools.
It was
Incredible.
amazing. And it was my first tour, and I felt so privileged to be there. It was the highlight for me. And for parents who did not have the opportunity to see the inside of the buildings, I have to tell you, I think everyone worked together, really echoing the shared value options when you think about it, innovation and problem solving and collaboration, and the detail that was given to big things, but also to small things. The signage was beautiful.
Yeah.
It was so amazing. And I thank everybody who was part of that.
Yeah. I think we all left really excited for the
Yeah.
start of school.
Yeah.
I think we all are familiar with people who have a job and punch the clock, and we can see the difference between that and people who really understand that they're doing this for the kids, and setting up those chairs and cleaning those surfaces and getting everything ready. They get the big picture of what we're all doing here.
And people should know there were teachers in the classroom last night
Mhm.
at 7 and 8 p.m. preparing those rooms.
Mm-hmm.
It was
Right, they didn't know anybody was coming through, but we
Yeah.
stumbled across, right, innumerable
We
people.
were invited into their spaces.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah, they're excited. It's a nervous excitement that we all are feeling, the parents are feeling, the kids are feeling, but that's still exciting, and I think we all felt it. I appreciate hearing that from everyone.
so thank you to everybody.
But yes.
I think we're all feeling like we're not sure how to say thank you enough, like how to be crystal clear about our gratitude and appreciation.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And that, let's be clear, to everyone, the administrators, everyone.
Yes. Yes.
Knowing your child is safe, but also going to have fun and learn in creative ways, there's no value. There's no way that you can express that appreciation to people who are part of that. So thank you.
So Peter, this was a shorter superintendent's report you gave than normal, but hopefully we fleshed it out a little bit to highlight some of the things that you did, that you oversaw as superintendent of this entire enterprise, that were really touching. So thank you, and thank everyone.
Well, thank you. You can do my superintendent's report every 2 weeks this way, right? This was good, and I would say on behalf of all of our amazing teachers and administrators who have worked really hard, we are ready to go, and we're super excited to get there, right? And to underestimate Chris Zublionis' and Olivia Buatzi's role in when nobody did. But the two of them have just been machines for the past 6 months. And I really do appreciate their partnership.
And we have to add one other thing.
Yeah.
This is different than how other districts are doing it. There are many districts that did not open this week, and we opened. And I think that is because of the enormous talent we have here.
That's a great point.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you made that, because not everybody made it to this day.
All right, I'm excited for day 2.
Me too.
But first, we have some additional district business. We're going to go to our regular business portion of the meeting, and we'll talk about district goals. Peter?
Sure. Okay, so district goals are something we do every year. Normally, we start them in August. This year, we were a little sidetracked by reopening, and we weren't quite sure what the goals really needed to look like as we opened up. That said, as we've discussed, the 1920 goals, some of them need to carry forward. And so what I wanted to talk with the board tonight about is the extent to which, to get your ideas about perspective and what focus points you'd like us to focus on. I could lay out for you where we think we need to carry forward from 1920. And a large part of our goals this year will be really monitoring the reopening, keeping everybody, healthy and safe, meeting with our guidelines for Department of Health reporting. We just found out just a couple of days ago that at 3 p.m. every day we have to submit data into the Department of Health tracking system. So a lot of this stuff is happening on the fly. But for the past couple of years, we have been structuring goals into one on the shared valued outcomes, one on an analysis of the instructional program, and then the third has always been on our policy review. And so in terms of the shared valued outcomes, we've done all the work necessary to building the skills, the dispositions, and the learning progressions in each of the 6 SVOs. And I think at this point, we're looking forward to taking the next step forward in how do the SVOs inform our assessment practices. So we'd like to work on that this year. And then in terms of the analysis of the instructional program, we need to get back to the math assessment once we get started, because that was just about to get off the ground in March when we went remote. The internal audit and self-study of PE, health, and athletics, and the operationalizing the process to review evidence-based practices. We also have all of our bargaining unit contracts that need to come over. And my suggestion is that we dig into policies. We pretty much did the 6,000s and the 7,000s last year, is to probably wrap things up, maybe do 8, 9, and the zeros going into this year. But that's sort of a general overview of where we were, and the getting us started from it's a little tricky to start building, right as we reopen. It's a little tricky to really focus on what the academic goals will be as we get in there. But I do also would like to put out there, we have a huge opportunity before us with technology, informing our instruction, with the manner in which we do teaching and learning outdoors is a huge opportunity for us. And so these are things that I think we can build into the work that we set out to do. And so I will turn it over to the board for any feedback that you'd like to give us.
Okay, I see trustee Jones' hand.
Sure.
Sure. So, so I think it's important, obviously their goals align with the strategic plan, but we are in a very strange position with having a global pandemic at the same time. And so, when I was just thinking about what the big goals for the district would be, I was trying to think of things that were still very much in keeping with what the strategic plan was, but that would also speak to the very real situation that we're in right now. And to me, it started to shape in my mind as like, we have to have a healthy physical environment, right? Like, in the sense that the health of our students is obviously always important. But it also aligns with the fact that we're going to put tremendous time and money into the physical environment. And so that feels like, to me, a goal we should be tracking and acknowledging. And I think we could do it in a way with a very long-term view. There are things we have to do with regard to the physical environment that are short-term and immediate, like we have to have face masks. But when you're talking about things like improving your ventilation system, where there's long-term data about how that impacts productivity and health overall, it's a way to see a real opportunity that the things we do now, if we do them well, will pay off for years to come. So that makes sense to me as a goal. We always have part of our goals around teaching and learning. We know we have to address remote learning. We have remote learners right now that are fully remote. We have hybrid learning, and we all believe that at some point it's very likely we'll go remote again. So the idea of having a goal around like high quality remote learning really speaks to all of us, and it is complex and difficult, and what that means to different people means very different things. But there's no question that that's an important goal to us. And then the last piece of it in my mind, sort of ties everything together, is that this idea of having like a measurable improvement in student engagement. We know that everything that's going on, whether it's the pandemic or whether it's how we conduct in-person, hybrid, or remote learning, is going to impact student engagement. We know how we have not one but two past Bach-Harrison surveys that give us very specific numbers on student engagement, and the numbers are not at all what we thought they would be. Like, they really indicate that there is a disconnect, a problem between what we think we're providing and the environment that we think that we're creating, and what students are saying about how they feel about school. And it's measurable and it's concrete, and it is not necessarily a 6-month goal or even a year goal, but it is a real goal that's important to all of us, and we all feel like we're trying to put a lot of resources in, and we can measure it. So I think that student engagement goal is critical, particularly because we know it's hard with remote learning, right? Hence, all the more important. We always have policy revisions on the list, which is critical. There's no question you need to review policy on a regular basis. I think there are going to be policy revisions that are really dictated by the pandemic, like code of conduct. There are a lot of things that come up with just all of the reopening committees that impacted policies. So I think what we look at with regard to policy has to reflect not so much the sequence, but where the pandemic is forcing us to look at policy instead of our usual systems.
Thank you.
Great.
Other trustees? I'm sorry, Peter. Did I cut you off? It's very hard to tell. Peter, did I cut you
I
off?
said I agree.
Okay.
I agree with all of that.
Okay.
did we get the backup material? I never found it today, and I know someone reached out to you with it. Was there any backup material with the
There-
district that came
There
out?
was not. There was not, Marion. So I thought we would review, we just over the last few days, we got really underwater with the reopening. And so we thought we would just have tonight's conversation be more of an organic conversation about the goals and where we want to be. But I have not proposed 2021 goals, but I wanted to get your feedback first.
Where are we with the math assessment, and how is that going to work with bringing people into the building with the COVID protocols?
It can definitely be done. And it's definitely on the, we definitely we'll bring that forward for this year.
So do we have a date certain that we picked a group the last spring, right?
Yes.
And they were about to come in when we shut down. So do
Yeah.
we have a date certain that they're coming in?
We do not have a new date yet. If directed, so I can, set that up. We had talked very much in the early days of the pandemic, hoping we'd be back, and we were proposing dates in late spring. But it's the group based out of NYU. We can, easily do that. So I never brought the contract forward to you. All of that we took off the table at the time, but I can easily set that up again.
I'm just wondering if this is the appropriate time to be investing in a math assessment when you have a situation where you've had a gap in the educational learning because
Yeah.
of the remote instruction in the spring, and you don't have necessary classroom teachers teaching in the elementary level. Some of those teachers I'm not saying that they're not qualified. I'm just saying that some of them have been specialists who may not have gotten the training
Yeah.
on the math, because that's not what they weren't teaching classroom math. And you have new hires this year who we don't know what training they've gotten on our math programs. I'm just, at least at the elementary level, I think you're probably more solid at the middle school and the high school level, because you don't have the number of new faculty that are infused in it. But you do have this big gap, and as you're going up the grade, the gap is even more significant because you're taking whole portions of curriculum. So I'm just wondering if we really want to invest this year in that math assessment, because I'm not sure it's going to be informative based upon the factors that we're facing right now.
Right, because really what you would be measuring is the result of the pandemic, not necessarily the result of the math program.
Well, I think when we look at these reviews, building off what Trustee Russo said, because I agree. I think we look at these reviews as saying, in general, big picture, we're doing something. We think we're doing well, but are we really doing as well as we think we are? Should we be doing better? Are there parts of this that we need to really analyze and understand better? Now we're talking about a totally different environment. I'm not sure we're going to get that information, and I think it, building off again what Trustee Russo said, I think it might behoove us better to focus more on what we're doing now with this unique crisis situation, rather than try to change the fundamentals of a program. For example, we've been doing, Singapore math for all these years, not all these years, but some number of years. Determining the efficacy of that program is very hard to do in this environment, and we really want to know. I'd rather see how we're actually delivering math and how we're delivering all of our academic program as pertinent to this situation, as opposed to really doing a deep dive into a curriculum that we may not even really be doing our best at anyway, through no fault of our own, but because, again, as Sarah said, we could be flipping back between remote and live and all kinds of various iterations. So,
Well, that's a good point, right? Because I don't want to be get to a point where I think what we've learned. Let me back up for a second. I think what we've learned over the past several months is that our approaches need to be very nimble.
Yeah.
So, and our goals should be as well. So, what I'd like to recommend that we do is set up goals that can be met whether we are in person or remote or in some kind of hybrid situation, that a closure doesn't preclude us from moving forward.
So what I'm hearing from Sarah and Peter is that we really should look sort of aspirationally, very macro level, right? Instead of small. So thinking about the physical space, physical safety, I think we have to think about that as being completely integrated with student learning, because students can't learn if they're not safe. So I love the idea of including physical safety as a district goal this year. I think that's in some ways our most important, if not really only goal that we should have, keeping people and children and faculty safe. And then the idea of student engagement seems so important on so many levels. And we have such good data that reflects that this is an area of weakness for us. And I think that could be, if we do include something about student engagement, we can use that as a way to look at science and social studies and enrichment and all of those programs that are so important and so North Shore to us.
The only thing I would say about the student engagement piece is that really where the student engagement sort of tails off is more, I think, at the middle school, in particular at the high school level. And with the constraints being put on extracurriculars due to the pandemic and not having everyone here at the same time, again, this may not be the time to necessarily focus on that in detail. So, we're sort of living in a strange world, right? So things that we would normally do, a math assessment, may not be prudent at this time, may not really where we want to allocate our resources. Student engagement is a little off too because of the parameters we're working under, but certainly I think student mental health, depression, how to engage them in a remote environment, that should really be, I think, a priority, because this COVID-19 is very isolating for certain groups. And I think the students crave that sort of interaction, which is why, we get these situations where we have spikes in the cases with young people because, they want to be together. So I think we should be looking at ways that we can creatively bring them together and while still being remote. So, like one of the things that, just like an example, my son is studying lighting design. And he was, of course, supposed to do summer stock, and he couldn't. So what his head of department did was they did an online production. And he was doing the technical end of the online production. Projects like that where you could have students who are not even in school who could be participating and still engage and in contact with their peers. I know that Regis did their robotics remotely. They did their chess club remotely. So if there are ways that we can engage students in those extracurriculars that are just a little different than the way they would normally be run, I think we should be looking into that as well.
Thank you. Peter?
Yeah, I was going to say, Sarah Lamar and Chris and I have been talking about how to get clubs off the ground for this year, because we think they're really important and a really key way to engage kids. A lot of that will be remote. We're hoping to be able to do some stuff in person, but we'll have the advisors start to propose those to us within the next couple of weeks.
I just want to make sure we're not only thinking about engagement in terms of extracurriculars, though.
Correct. Yeah.
Engagement in the classroom really should be our priority, right? So
Totally.
school can be fun and include experiential learning, and that's when children actually are the most engaged. So I think we have to take it both ways, extracurriculars as well as in the academic setting.
No, I wasn't suggesting that we
Okay.
weren't. No, obviously that's part of it. That's, I think, what I started in the beginning. It's just one of the ways you get students to engage is through
Of course.
extracurriculars coming. But yes, that's obviously part of it. And I think engagement, especially for those academically who are not in the building on a regular basis, we saw how hard and difficult that was in the spring to keep, especially our high school population engaged in learning. Yes, obviously, yeah, that would be part of it.
And actually, I think you're right with the mental health issues. But again, that ties into engagement, right? Because when students are engaged in the classroom, their minds are intellectually stimulated and they don't become neurotic and depressed. So I think a lot of what we do to address mental health issues are not really getting at the core, which is the material in class is not always delivered in a way which is highly engaging. And when we do that, you're going to see better mental health outcomes.
I think bring it back to what Trustee Jones said earlier. We have the evidence from Buck Harrison that shows for all of these reasons that this student engagement, whether it's emotional issues or whether it's just connection or whether it's academic success, or in some circumstances, avoiding clearly negative outcomes, the engagement piece is critical to the success of our team.
It is. And I just wanted to say how much I appreciated like that Trustee McCary and Trustee Russo, that conversation they just had was, I think, just really described it so beautifully across that whole spectrum of engagement. I really appreciated that. Thank you.
And I want to speak just as an elementary school parent. We have the data in terms of the middle school and the high school. We do not have data on engagement on the elementary school level. And that might be something that we need to consider.
We have a little bit. We have a benchmark, should we wish to pursue it, from when we did extensive surveys when we were formulating the strategic plan, like before the strategic plan was written.
With
And there was survey data on those grades 3 to 5 students.
Right.
So there is a little bit of something that we could try to
Right.
capitalize
And
on.
I remember it was not positive. The question was something like, do you look forward to coming to school every day, or do you like school? And
Right.
it was
It
was not
wasn't.
positive.
But it is data,
Good.
and we can.
I would
Go
say there
from
was
there.
room for
And I think
improvement. I wouldn't say
maybe-
it was wholly.
I think Trustee Russo was trying to make a point that maybe the benchmarks we could consider the idea that the benchmarks have shifted because this is really hard. Am I mischaracterizing?
No, yeah, what
You
I'm
know,
saying is
but
that
it's-
the way we traditionally
We should
look
do
at
it, but it's
district goals
different.
may have to adjust as we've adjusted the classroom, right? And as we've adjusted the dynamic of learning. And if we get shut down again, it's going to have to be adjusted from there. If we're lucky enough to stay open, well, we can work within, those confines. And certainly, I think whatever we ascertain in this sort of bizarre world will certainly be informative for us when we go back to, regular full in-person instruction. And maybe what it will tell us by doing this is that we need to make changes to what was normal. They always, I hate to use the expression the new normal because I feel like it's just overused. But maybe what we learn from this section will inform what this period of time will inform what we do moving forward. And hopefully what we do moving forward will help with that engagement portion. Because now we're not able to just roll out what we traditionally did. Here are the clubs, here's the club fair, sign up.
Yeah.
Here are the clubs after school for the kids. Can they do that? Maybe we need to think differently about how we engage, students and student learning and the maybe we have to have, I've been hearing this since, my kids were in elementary school about differentiated instruction, but it never seems to get there, especially at the elementary level where you have the kids all in one classroom and there's not the opportunity to pick classes that interest you. So maybe this smaller model will give us a little more flexibility in terms of how we instruct students in a more individualized manner. going forward.
I had a couple thoughts, but I want to give the other trustees who haven't had a chance to have anything to,
Yeah, I want to add to that. It's so interesting because, and I'm going to speak to the Bach Harrison. I think as a district, we really, I think we've done a lot to provide our students with both extracurricular and enrichment opportunities to keep them engaged. And I think that's one of the benefits of what we do. We really have a lot for every kid. And I remember Tim, the equity study, and some things that stood out to us, that there was some answers to those surveys that were pretty disturbing. There was a cluster that said, I hate school, I don't feel particularly connected to it, I don't feel I belong. And I remember we were thinking, how can we reach that cluster? How can we even identify them? And every year when we approve clubs, I think we do a pretty good job of sifting through them, and we're mindful of what who's bringing them up. Oftentimes they're students who are trying to fulfill some sort of interest. And for the most part, I think we approve all of them because there's something that they took the time to put together and they find interesting for them and their peers to be engaged with. And I think if we look to the past 6 months, we can see the gaps in what we need to do in terms of foundational technology to support those teachers and students who want to think outside the box to create remote opportunities. There's something in place of, their physical presence. I'm just thinking about where we're hearing about the athletes.
Can you speak up, Lisa?
The reason why they come to school is so they can participate in their chosen sport or sports. If they're performers, if they're performing artists, they're physical artists. The reason why they come to school is so they can participate in those things, and that keeps them engaged in their sport. So there are a lot of areas we have to think about in this kind of, I don't want to even call it a new normal because we're still sorting this out. I think we'd be ambitious in maybe undertaking a technology review from both foundational technology, educational applications, ed tech, and then on pedagogy, obviously. I think throughout the 6 months, we could see what gaps there are that we have to work with. Maybe this is an opportunity to bring that forward as part of our strategic plan. I think that's a strategic thing to look at and review. I would say at the athletic review, we may have to put that off as well.
good?
Done.
Okay. Sarah?
All right. I thought those were excellent points. And it made me think, like, when is the right moment to do that kind of technological review? And I honestly have no idea. And I mean, I think the board's been consistent in supporting like the infrastructure level upgrades, but I think Lisa's getting at something different now that we're talking much more about like the instructional side of technology. So I'm like, when do you do that and how?
Right.
And so then in my mind, it started to come back to professional development. And so I started to think, did I really overlook that when I was thinking about the goals earlier? Because a significant increase in professional development was mandated by the state. I'm going to look at Dr. Z and he's going to nod unless I'm making that up or if that's true.
That is true.
Okay. So given that's important, given that it's mandated by the state, given that we have to do it, and I'm assuming it's a significant lift, like much like with the physical environment, if we need to do it, it's important, it's required. Should we, I'm going to say recognize it by putting it in the goals, because it has to happen. It's going to take an enormous amount of time and resources to do so. So maybe it should be there. And I feel like maybe I overlooked that, and Lisa made me
No, and I
think of it differently.
Peter speaks to us being nimble. If having that type of analysis and review and an implementation, a plan, a strategic plan and implementation on the tech side, both on the actual physical tech, the application, the ed tech, and then the instructional side, the pedagogy. that will make us more nimble. I mean, it stands to reason it would make us more nimble going forward. Not that it's ever going to take the place of in-person instruction, and it shouldn't. It's adjunctive. And it could be utilized creatively. And I know there are teachers who have utilized technology on their own to create flipped classrooms in their instruction. So if they have their students watch a video, really well-chosen video instruction, and then they come back to class and they have the discussion about what they've just viewed, either for homework or it would be a homework flipped video, and they come back and have the discussion and say, what are your questions? There's so much to be said about that flipped classroom, and I know there are teachers who do it. We don't require it. They've done it on their own with supervision, I'm sure. But I think this is an opportunity. We should look at this as an opportunity.
I'm kind of curious if Dr. Z has anything he wants to add to that conversation. He's been like deeply
in his back.
right. I mean, he's been so deeply involved in all of these issues. I'm not putting you on the spot.
I love this.
I mean, you are a little bit, but
I am, but I'm like, you can just. I'm giving you an opportunity.
No,
If
thank you.
Wish to say, I wish you would say that.
I think, and trustees have pointed this out, that this is an opportunity. It's really forced us all to ask the question: why do we do things the way that we do? The rationale, and in there lie the opportunity for the remote learning hybrid conversation to redefine what we do when we do come back in person. So I think the best professional development we could offer is that which is a blended model that helps us look at what we're doing remotely, but that also would translate back into in-person, redefined in-person practices as well. And I think, I did want to mention that at the remote learning meeting we had for elementary parents earlier this week, we talked a lot about clubs as an opportunity virtually for remote learners to participate and to make connections. Along with outdoor learning and opportunities. And I think, the best, most engaging learning is, those aspects of extracurricular clubs that you might find that the teachers who get that right, who design that kind of instruction, you see aspects that you would see in extracurricular clubs, but in science and in the core curriculum. So I think this is an opportunity to really define a structure to deliver that professional development. We're talking about Roberta Kang working with us on a monthly basis in a more structured way, also programs on Superintendent's Conference Day, and that's exactly her wheelhouse, what you're talking about.
Thank you.
Thank you.
She was terrific on opening day, by the way. She gave a great speech. I appreciated the way that she was just even keeled and kept the pace going, and as she dealt with some challenges or questions in the presentation, she just kept moving. I think that was a really good modeling for what we're all expected to do, and especially our faculty. Rich or Tim? Rich, do I have any?
If Rich wants to go,
No, I'm fine. I think we've covered just about everything.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, my concern over the past 6 months and going forward this year is, it's what Lisa brought up about kids and what you've brought up about kids feeling isolated and detached and that sense of belonging, but actually putting in place processes and procedures to identify those kids and to, something tangible to actually bring them into the fold and to get them involved. But also with academics. With the remote learning, a lot of kids I know last semester have were falling through the cracks, fell through the cracks. And it's going to happen with remote learning. That's going to be an ongoing problem. And I'd like to see mechanisms put in place that, again, identify those kids and that we have a support system to get them caught up and to give them the support they need, whether it's academic or addressing social emotional issues. But I want to see what it is that we're doing to address that.
Thank you. From my perspective, I'll be brief. we talked a lot about as we go through this and everything we're doing this year with remote learning and hybrid and the whole academic program that we've put in place here, the question of continuous review. I'm not sure if it's at the goal level, but I really want to make sure that we are not just doing things now, September 10, and launching and going, but that we are spending a lot of time to review what we're doing, making sure that it's working, and getting data that's going to give us the answers to those questions. We owe it to, everyone is giving to some degree the benefit of the doubt and knows that our heart is in the right place and our minds are in the right place. And we're putting together a very solid program, but nothing's going to be perfect from the outset, as we all said. And it's important that we fulfill our promise to this community to continue to get better at this. We think we're doing pretty well, and we're hopeful, and we believe in the plan.
So what would that look like, Dave, as a goal?
I think the goal would be to create data-driven rubrics and measurements of the success of our programs along the lines that we've discussed. So student engagement in this environment. I guess what I'm saying is all the things that we're doing and these goals have to be seen within the context that we're operating. This is not a normal year. It's not just math a priori, thinking about the way our program is, but it's a question of, is it working in this environment? We believe in our program. We have our program. Are kids succeeding in those programs given the delivery methods that we've set in place? Is remote working for those kids? Is going outdoors working in the way that we've set it up? All the different things that we've set in place come up with measurements. It's not an overarching goal, but it's a commitment from the district that they're keeping the eyes on what we're doing along the way with all of these things. Outdoor emphasis, for example, has been a huge area here. Ventilation has been a huge area. We all have had, I believe, even after one day, anecdotal comments about the degree to which windows are open or ventilators are on full blast or whether kids are taking off their masks and all the rest of these things. I'd like to see some evidence of that, to see that we're really enacting these things properly, that it's working, not just the way we put it in place, but that it's actually delivering the right results. And the other thing I was going to say is...
And that's your evidence-based.
Pardon me?
And that's your evidence-based goal.
That's exactly right. Exactly right. But what I was going to say as well, and this was a lesson of this past year, I very much do not want to bite off more than we can chew with goals and set ourselves up for coming up short. So when we talk about maybe some of the reviews we had in place, like math or some other ones, it may be important that we do scale back and make sure what we do well. Because while this is all going on, there are going to be new challenges. We all hate to say it, but we don't know what's coming.
I think we can have very important, very significant, very heavy lift goals that are 100% in line with what we have to do, and the goals ensure that we do it really well. That's, I think, what we're trying to achieve with a healthy physical environment, good, high quality remote learning, high quality professional development that supports everything. I think it's in line with the strategic plan, but it is a different way to think about those, the goals that are in it.
So are we all set, Peter? It's not a laundry list. It's finding out what we got to do and doing it well.
Yes, I've got it. Took a lot of notes. Chris and I'll work together. We'll get you a draft in the next few days.
Okay. I think if that's set, we can move on to... Everyone good? Move on to Legislative Action Committee's goals for 2020, 2021. Trustee Madden will be the liaison, so I believe you're going to lead this discussion, Tim.
Well, yeah, and I'm just looking for your feedback. I'm the liaison this year to the Legislative Action Committee, and as I guess at new business last time, I said I'd be asking this question. And is there a specific direction that you would like to give to the committee about what they should be pursuing?
Trustees? I see a hand. Yep.
I'm happy to go. I can't imagine that a big focus of this can't be financial, which I think, given the pandemic, plays out in a lot of ways. I don't I don't know if federal level stuff is an overreach, but what's going on with FEMA reimbursements is incredibly impactful and awful for us in so many ways that I think we have to put it out there. Like, it was somewhat limited to start with, but that shifting landscape is just becoming more nightmarish to us all the time. There's state aid issues. Right now they're talking about several significant delays. So I think that plays out in a few ways. Like, you could argue that we need to make sure state aid remains merely a delay, right? Not a cut. But I think there are other things that you can argue around that about, like, the state has done so many things that impact our cash flow, like the state aid delays, but also changing the schedule of the tax payments, et cetera, et cetera. They've done a lot of things that have forced us into a situation in which we have to do much more borrowing than we ever have. So ideally, the state should deal with the cash flow issues for schools. Like, so find a way for us to have interest-free loans if you're not going to give us enough money that we know is coming such that we can operate. Then if you can't do that, then at minimum, like, go talk to the state comptroller and change the fiscal stress formula so that we don't get because you made us borrow twice as much money as we ever had to for the cash flow payments, which were always entirely dependent on the schedule of payments. And I mean, everything gets to unfunded mandates, right? And unfunded mandates is not so much like a list of things in the past that we've had to do that the state didn't give us money for. Like, over the past couple of years, the state mandated testing the water for lead. That's important. We're happy to do it. We did it ahead of time. But of course, they didn't give us any more money to do it, and it happened. They changed the accounting criteria such that we had to account for how money is spent on a per building basis, which was important in a lot of districts, not ours so much. But they wanted to make sure there wasn't an equity issue about how money was being distributed. But to actually do the changes in the accounting system, all of that costs money. And so now obviously this year we're in a very same situation. We have to do the health screenings, costs a lot of money. You have to have PPE, costs a lot of money. You have to have social distancing, which means we had to hire a lot more people. You can't put as many kids on the bus. This obviously costs money. All money well spent, but money nonetheless. And we can say that that's all water under the bridge in some sense, although we want to deal with FEMA and all of that. But going forward, right, ideally, anytime the state says this is really, really important and you need to do this differently, if it's really important, they should give us the money to do it, right? And right at this particular moment, for the state to say you need to do something new while simultaneously cutting your state aid just it makes the whole thing seem particularly absurd. That might be all I have.
Can I just jump in and build on one of those because
Yeah.
it's directly related? One of the issues that NISBA in general is working on is the relationship between cuts in state aid and the tax cap formula. I think that's an important piece for them to look at and give us a briefing on where that is. That they give you the formula, but if they're taking away part of your revenue, potentially that could impact the formula. So that would be a small add-on. Sorry to interrupt.
So we were talking about student engagement, and I can't help but think about the state tests, particularly the 3 to 8 tests. And this just doesn't seem like the year that curriculum should be adjusted. We need to adjust curriculum to focus on the emotional needs of the students this year. So I really feel strongly that we need to advocate for 3 to 8 tests to be canceled and to be canceled early so that we do not have to devote unnecessary energy to test prep, and that we can keep the students well adjusted and happy and learning in a really authentic way during this very unique year.
I think that's a good point. We know our teachers, our administrators are concerned about learning loss, and will do everything that's developmentally appropriate to address that. And you don't need this other arbitrary line. And I mean, honestly, our schools will be fine on the test, but it's such an equity issue, right? Those tests are going to really harm other districts, right? And we have the wherewithal to say this is not appropriate. It protects districts with fewer resources than we have. I think that's important.
And the results of our last tests were very, very high. So there's no reason to think that we would, not find that again this year.
Any other thoughts? Yeah, Marianne?
So, when the LIPA issue first reared its head, LAC spent a lot of time with community outreach, educating them on the LIPA issue and on sending letters to our representatives. I think it's important that the community be educated with respect not just to, the LIPA issue, but the other issues that have arisen with, the state aid, the FEMA, getting reimbursement from FEMA. So I think it's really important that our LAC be more visible to the community at large, which is going to be a little more tricky in this environment where you're not having large gatherings, right? So maybe they have to have a bigger presence on maybe social media, some other platforms. Traditionally, it was done through the PTOs. I don't know what the PTOs are doing now, but I really think it's important that we reach out to all segments of the community, have LAC reach out to all the segments of the community about the impact of potential settlement, what LIPA is, and, to, encourage our county executive, to take whatever action, we deem appropriate in consultation with our professionals, how we, want that, and maybe not to be a pilot if they're going to do it that way, to keep it on the tax rolls, and why that's important. Because I think people understand the big issue and are aware of it, but I don't think they understand the intricacies of it. And when I tell people, 20% of our state aid was cut, they're surprised. But, I'm not, because they're, it's just everyone's busy with their everyday lives. So, that we should get reimbursement from FEMA. All those things that I think people are not aware of, that perhaps we should be doing a job educationally with our community so that they can then reach out to the appropriate legislative branch to seek appropriate remedies. I don't think we're going to be getting aid from our legislatures like we have in the past, because obviously the state is broke thanks to the pandemic. But there are other things the state legislatures could do for us and the county could do for us that would be extremely helpful in our financial situation.
Beautifully said. Exactly.
Peter, anything that you would like us to pursue, or Olivia?
No, I think the big issues, the big imminent issues are probably around LIPA. But everything else that we talked about here certainly makes good sense. Olivia, do you have anything?
Yes, Trustee Jones took everything that was in my mind, and putting all those together so nicely was really very good, because it's been a major concern. They are taking state aid, but they mandate us to do things, and even with the FEMA reimbursement, they are cutting us off. Come September 15th, they don't want to reimburse us for a lot of things. This is something that we have to look at very, very, very carefully. we are pushing to meet the deadline, but it's still very difficult. And if you don't follow through, you don't get anything. And it's very impactful. And the trickle down effect of all these things that they are doing is not only going to impact our finances, but how we deliver education to people, and we have to take it extremely seriously.
This is where we may not want to be shy about contacting the Honorable Suwazi to weigh in on how he can help us with the FEMA, with the federal side of funding.
Yes.
So I was going to say, recently there was a property in our district that was getting IDA'd. We found out pretty late in the game. I think one thing that we can do is a very tangible project with LAC is to create a list, create a map of all the areas in our district that are IDA'd. And also, I know Olivia's has done tremendous work, and we've had luck with our attorneys and the County of Nassau at identifying a lot of the properties of the hundreds of parcels within the LIPA area. But I think that could be a project that LIPA can help us with as well, mapping those out and helping us understand literally where each of those are, because it's labyrinthine. And we could use that help, especially as there are many moves that they are making to slowly convert, slowly make changes, and slowly take more of them, little pieces, big pieces in various ways, off of our tax rolls. And so a simple map they could work on and start plugging them away, who owns them, how they're paying us, what the taxes are, what's on there, etc., could be a very discrete project.
That's a very good point. And it's not something that really overlaps like with NISBA's list too. It's just like the role of IDAs and the power they have. And I mean, even with the change in the county administration, the IDA is just up. I believe the IDAs and the pilots are a problem. I'll leave it at that.
And if I could add one more thing, I'm happy that Trustee Russo brought this up. The idea of the properties remaining on the tax roll versus a pilot is a big issue.
Mhm.
We have to look at it very,
Huge.
very quickly.
Can I also suggest when we may want to re-engage with our lobbyists and what role they could play with coordinating with LAC, or even giving LAC some suggestions on how, as a community, what kind of community fomenting we can do. And just so we don't overlap tasks.
Right.
But I think that we really need to re-engage and even maybe have them in the meeting.
Yep.
Once we set some legit goals, concrete goals.
Okay.
It's a good idea.
Got your work cut out for you, Tim.
I do.
I think we
It's good,
have
you gave
had
some
the
direction.
lobbyists in the past to actually meet back, but I think it would be helpful if the board had a meeting with the lobbyists before the lobbyists met the LAC.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah, I think we're due for another meeting, right? So-
Absolutely.
Do you want us to set that up?
I would love that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, we're paying the money.
Very exciting.
Anything else on LAC before we move on? All right. Thank you, Tim. Thank you, trustees. Peter, Olivia, good. We will now move on to comments from the public. Please, our only request is that you state your name and your town of residence. Welcome.
Rob Mazzella, Glenhead. Been a weird few months, so went through.
Rob, just, I don't know if you can turn up the dial a little bit. It's a little,
Is that better?
that is better. Thank you.
It's just been a weird few months, and went through a whole election cycle without actually seeing everybody. So I just wanted to come in person and congratulate trustees Galati and Makari. I have every confidence that they're going to do a fantastic job over the next 3 years, and that they're going to represent our community and our children in an exceptional manner. I did want to just, if there's one thing just about the LAC, if I may, please don't forget about New York American Water. There's a lot going on with that. Could have a potential impact on the school as well. especially if the efforts to go.
Well, I'm sorry.
I was just saying, please don't forget about New York American Water.
That's better. Thank you. Thank you.
There could be some potential impacts going on with all the machinations that are going on related to the water company, trying to take the water company public, also trying to get rid of franchise taxes. So there could be some impacts upon the school district as well. And if I may, just kind of one thing, and then I was just kind of listening to the board meeting on my way over here at the beginning. When you guys go off to the retreat, if you could try to keep in mind two things that I think make this school district special. Every board meeting, we talk about transparency. I think our district does a fantastic job of that, and I would hate to see a rollback on that. The second thing, we do espouse our middle school motto: everyone cares, everyone matters, everyone learns. I quite frankly didn't see a lot of the first two just at the beginning of this meeting. There were a lot of passive-aggressive comments, some aggressive comments. Whether you guys like it or not, you are role models for the community. And I think our children kind of deserve a little better than what I saw at the beginning of this meeting. So please keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. We have no one else. We do open it up to comments from the public electronically. We did receive one from Manish and Pujavira in Seacliff, which is, can you please update us on the ventilation in all of the schools? We've been told several times that we'd be receiving correspondence regarding how often clean air is being circulated into the classrooms and have not heard back yet. Additionally, the middle school seems to be having 3 meals, breakfast, lunch, and snack, in the classroom this year. Is there a way to make breakfast outdoors and snacks as working snacks outdoors to avoid students eating indoors unmasked so frequently during the day? This would also help the allergy students in our schools and limit their contact with food. The safety standards for allergy students that were in place pre-COVID are heavily compromised in the new school model this year. Any food safety precautions will not only help allergy students, but all students during the day. Thank you. Okay, and there is no one else. So we will now move on to the business portion.
Is there a chance? I think, I'm just going to interject.
please.
I think Olivia actually has some answers to that public comment, not to put her on the spot, but do you wish to address it, Olivia?
Yeah, we are looking at the menu.
Mm-hmm.
And we are making some changes to the menu so that it becomes, some of the food that we think are not allergy friendly will be eliminated on the menu. We took that action yesterday. Also, we are looking at serving some of those foods outside as much as possible. We are working with the principals on that to eliminate that. And then what we are also doing with the breakfast in particular is if we can, because there aren't a lot of kids who participate in breakfast. So if they can, in fact, at one of the schools, I know that some of the kids will even eat breakfast in the offices of the counselors. So we are all trying to do modification, but this continue to change because everything is changing by the day. But the major thing is that we've looked at peanut butter in particular, and the goal is to eliminate it from all the menus.
Oh my gosh, Mikey would have starved.
It's very different to serve
Tell
peanut
him
butter in
I'll
a
prepare
cafeteria
one
and have
for
a
him
peanut-free table than to literally deliver peanut butter to
Sandwiches, yeah, it's a different
every
environment.
classroom.
Mhm.
I think the extent to which we can serve food outside and kids can eat outside is
It's major.
huge. The issues with the ventilation are I want to be clear. The virus is airborne. If you statistically, if we have 3,000 people in our district, there are probably 3 infectious people at all times. By just breathing and talking, you exhale the virus. Masks help. They're not 100% efficient. And the longer you are inside, potentially the more the virus builds up. So when we have lunch, if the kids go outside to eat, it means you're not taking your mask off indoors, which means you're not exhaling virus, you're not inhaling virus. The virus isn't building up in the room. By leaving the room, our ventilation systems, which are much, much improved, our ventilation systems have a chance to clear the air. Because we improved our ventilation at this moment to like 6 air exchanges per hour, that means that if you clear the room for about an hour, the ventilation system has about a 99% chance of having completely overchanged the air in the room, right? Even though it's 6 air changes per hour, that means that every 10 minutes it pushes in the volume of air that's in the room into the room, but it doesn't mean it's a perfect replacement. The room has to be empty for about an hour for the air to be completely clear. So by getting kids out of the room, they're not exposed to the virus. And today's weather was a challenge. There's no question. And all of these parameters are only true until it gets cold. Once it gets cold, the univents can't bring 100% outside air, and then it's an entirely different game, which is why we're talking about trying to get HEPA filters into the room. But there really does seem to be a significant disconnect between what everyone in our buildings, students and staff alike, understand about what's happening. There is a pretty significant belief that if we're 6 feet apart, that we could take our mask off. It's potentially true that Chris and I could take our mask apart and one of us is infectious and we took our mask off for a couple of minutes, that'd be fine. But there aren't any good models about Chris and I sitting in a room for 6 hours with what our ventilation system is, even taking into account our pretty good ventilation, taking into account that we're both masks because masks don't have the 100% efficiency. You can't stay inside in the same room for 6 hours. The virus does build up. And everything that we put in the room, including like the plexiglass deck shields, impact how the air flows in the room and the extent to which it has to be open, which is why on the tour that we took last night, this was incredibly interesting. We have the univents that are bringing in 100% outside air. And so the univents are those things that when kids go into classrooms, they're against the walls with the windows. They have little vents coming out of the top and air is coming out. They should always fear air coming out. So they put signs on the windows directly above the univents that say, don't open this window, because the univents are bringing in 100% outside air. If you open a window directly above the univent, the outside air gets sucked right back outside. So if you keep that window closed but open any other window in the room, you get the air circulation. So when the univent brings in that outside air, there's no exhaust vent. It's just relying on the fact that when you push in new air, that the old air has to go somewhere, that our buildings just aren't airtight. When you open a window that's not over the univent, the air can flow outside much more efficiently, even if it's raining. And that is a message that I don't believe we're getting out efficiently enough to every single person in the district. Because there are 3 points statistically somewhere in the district putting virus into the air, and we can dilute that virus incredibly efficiently if we just let the univents do their work and we open the windows correctly. but we can also really circumvent that effort. If you close the window, if you run the AC, if you let the kids take their mask off 3 times for breakfast, lunch, and snack, then you're really rolling the dice on where the infectious person is. Like that is the super spreader event.
Yeah, I concur. I am very concerned that the message is not communicated to the teachers. And because it's not one message, right? It's very specific to the classroom that they're teaching in. So I don't know how we bridge that gap. But the feedback that I got today, there were parents concerned because it was raining and the AC was on and the windows were closed. And I think, Sarah, I have so much respect for you for what you've figured out with this ventilation system for the classrooms. I don't want to forget the buses. I heard the windows weren't open today on the buses. I'm very concerned about what's going on in the buses because the cohorts are mixing there. So I don't know what the solution is, but I think we quickly have to figure out how we're going to get this message out to everybody.
She makes such a good point, Olivia. Obviously, with pouring
I'll
rain
check
today,
on the buses.
it was a nightmare, right?
Yeah.
Like they should have the windows open, but of course it's pouring rain and you're driving. You don't want to
Correct.
the children.
It was
So it
raining
really
the whole
could
morning.
require, right, a modification. Like, can you put flashing over the windows so you can then crack them an inch or whatever it is? I would
I'll
love,
check on it tomorrow. Michelle and I will work on it.
that would be great. I think that'd make a huge difference, especially now that we saw that there was a new study that came out of China about very early in the pandemic, an infectious passenger on the bus using strictly recycled air. And also, I didn't know if the buses have different ventilation systems. Maybe the buses are bringing outside air. I have no idea.
It's almost like we need somebody appointed, I don't know, John Hall, somebody to go to each classroom to tell that particular teacher what is the best practice for that room based upon the ventilation system.
Peter, you're hearing this feedback?
I am, yes.
Okay. Because I think even with the tours last night, when we were going up and down the halls and asking about windows and testing out windows and seeing where they were going to go, it's a huge task. But on a room by room basis, this ventilation really is the key to everything. We all know that. And so making sure that is translated to the people in that room may require some assistance to individual teachers on a room by room basis.
It may. And even if the ventilation is perfect, they got to go outside. Like with the systems we have right now, the air exchanges, the MER filters we have, you still got to get kids outside. You still got to wear masks. Unfortunately, everything has to be perfect, and it's hard. This is a huge system.
And I don't really think there's an answer to the lunch and snack situation, other than when the weather is appropriate to take them outside for lunch. Because we're using the cafeterias and the libraries and any available space as instructional space, right? So I don't know that all the parents are aware of the parameters of what's being done and why their children are eating in their classroom. So, I mean, you get these, I mean, I know Pooja is, but I'm not sure every parent is. So I don't want to leave it out there that we're just, making kids eat in their classroom. There's really just no other place for them when it's pouring rain.
Or making them, I mean, and the flip side is true, right? Like you're absolutely right about getting that information out to the parent level that like, maybe it's a little drizzly, but we have canopies, like they won't melt, like to get the message out to them that like the inside air is so important that it is more important that kids just step outside even if the weather isn't fantastic right? Because like the weather permitting thing is, I mean, you would agree, right, that weather permitting is something entirely different to parent A and parent B, right? It's
Right,
like,
I would put my kids in a snowsuit and put them outside, but that's me. Anything to get them out of the house.
But I think, Sarah, that's also a really good point, which is that part of this is the administration communicating with our teachers and our buildings and grounds and our facilities, but it's also a lot about communicating with our parents and our community. And people have very different perspectives on not just what the rules are, but as we all know, on the value of the rules that we've put in place. That's just a fact. People feel differently about them. But we have those rules in place, and it's important because the system becomes very porous if individual spots are susceptible to non-compliance. So I'm looking at you, Chris, because Peter's not here. So, but
I mean, just right or wrong, we need to be cautious. That is our role,
And
right?
unintentional non-compliance. I'm sorry. Like
of
a
course,
teacher might think they're doing the right thing by keeping the windows shut. They don't realize that's a mistake, you know.
of course, a
Um,
7-year-old goes to the bathroom and doesn't put their mask back on. I mean, these are little kids in
Right.
some places.
Right. You think the AC is filtering the air, right? This is what everybody believes, is that AC is good, right? It helps if you have allergies, but it's not filtering and it's not outside air. It's just recircling the air,
Well,
which
it
may or
depends
may
on the
not have
AC.
virus. That's just luck.
That's right.
It depends on the AC. So the room, the unit air conditioners, the room air conditioners, your traditional plug-in model does not filter the air.
Right. Our
But a
right. Our window
larger
units have
AC
no
system
filtration,
Yes.
no
does
outside air.
Absolutely, like a central air system does absolutely filter.
Like the new model we have in the middle school cafeteria.
Well, yes, no, but yes and no. Like the new system in the cafeteria is only a MERV 9. I don't know if it brings in outside air or not. It is not.
I'm talking about the
Clean
chiller
air.
kind of system. I'm not talking necessarily about.
But I think that we may want to consider, Peter, at some point, usage of the Parent Academy model for health and safety precautions as well, to help people understand.
You do it remotely with pictures
Sure.
of the classrooms too, right?
Yes.
So, they don't, obviously you don't want all these people walking through your buildings, right? But you could do it with a slideshow on a Zoom meeting.
Sure. Sure.
This is a good point. Peter brought up a good point to me the other day that like this idea, and it was in an article, I don't know if it's the Atlantic or the Times, that the idea that like if you tell parents that their kids are in pods, right, that then they feel sort of safe, and then we could do lots of things with the pods, when the opposite is actually true, right? The fact that your kid's going to school at all, even if there's a pod, has increased the risk. And so you probably need to actually clamp down on your other risk, whatever your scale is with your family. And so if you're with y'all's idea about parent education, I think it fits in with what some of the stuff Peter's been thinking about. Am I wrong, Peter?
No, you're not. It's actually it's a really important point, right? Because the being in school with the numbers of people that we're all around is raises the risk. So it really does behoove all of us that when we're not in school or at work or whatever, to be taking extra precautions to make sure that we're not exposing ourselves, right? So to really clamp down even more than even less. But I think coming back to school gives everybody a sense of security that that we want them to have, but it doesn't mitigate the need to be judicious in other parts of your life.
Well, that could be all part of, the parent university. And I do think that oddly enough, if you do it on a Google Meet or a Zoom, you have a much better chance of people actually going because,
Yep.
like me, I don't get home from work until 7, 8, 9 o'clock at night. So I'm not going out necessarily to a meeting because sometimes I can't even just be there on time. So anyone who's anywhere, if they're at work, wherever they are, they could just tune in And I think you'll have a better turnout than you would in a traditional parent university model. It's something to think about going forward.
I think we've all learned, this is the silver lining, right? We've all learned it is much easier to log into a Zoom than to go somewhere, right? It's just true.
At times, for sure.
And you don't have to turn on the video.
But I just don't want to lose the point that I think that I agree with the parent university. Excuse me. But I don't want to lose the point that I think we need a point person for the teacher in each individual room.
We'll work on that.
I think you're right.
We'll work on that.
Okay. Thank you. I'm glad we used that as a stepping board to get onto some topics that were important. We will move on to the action portion of our meeting. We move on to action C, which is approval of various personnel approvals. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Any questions or comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Betty, you got that? Okay, great, thank you. Move on to action item D, which is the approval of budget transfers in the amount of $146,121 to cover reassignment of teacher assistants. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
And I have a second as well. Questions or comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Action item E, which is the award of contract for printing services to Stevenson Printing for printing services. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Second.
Questions? Okay, action item E, we were voting. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Action F, which is the approval of an agreement between North Shore and SCO Family of Services, Westbrook Preparatory, to provide instructional and related services. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second.
Questions, comments, discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Action item G, agreement between North Shore and Positive Behavioral Support Consulting and Psychological Resources. A motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Second.
Any questions? All in favor, say aye.
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 Action H, approval of an agreement with North Shore Central School District and the Great Neck Union Free School District to provide special ed instruction and related services. The motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Comments or discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Action letter I, approval of agreement between North Shore and Metro Therapy to provide academic tutoring services. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor, say aye.
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 Action item J, which has two parts, which is the approval of special education services contracts with A, Locust Valley Central School District for special ed, and B, Syosset Central School District for special ed. Do I have a motion
Motion.
and a second?
Second.
Any comments? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Action K, approval of a memorandum of agreement between the North Shore Central School District and the NISFA regarding continuity of instruction for students as ordered by the governor during the COVID-19 pandemic. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
Second?
Second.
Any questions or comments on this one?
I'll make a comment. I already have expressed my reservations and concerns. I will vote for it because of the timing, but I am going to follow up on those concerns, and I expect them to be addressed.
And I'll echo Tim's concerns.
I concur.
I do as well.
So do I. It's well said, Tim.
Yeah.
Any other questions or comments on this one? Okay, action sorry, action item K.
You have to vote.
We have to vote.
I was just restating action item K.
Okay.
We're now going to vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you. Action item L, approval of an agreement between the North Shore Central School District and Adrian Daly, doing business as Daily Portraits and Photography for freelance photography at school events throughout the year. Do I have a motion?
Motion.
And a second?
Second?
Any questions or comments? I think she made us all look good in the last photo, so
There you go.
that's an achievement. I appreciate it. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Action item M, approval of agreement between North Shore Central School District and Web Cola Media to provide website design, development, updates, and maintenance. Motion?
I have a question. What's the timeline on this? Oh, sorry.
Well, I'm sorry, let's have a motion
Motion.
and a second we have. Now questions or comments?
What's the timeline on this? I couldn't find it in the document.
This is the
Well, it's,
company that's been maintaining our
yeah, we're putting it for
website
the year, but it's ongoing.
indefinitely.
Okay, I thought it was like a new
always,
project.
It's everything from uploading to changing names and addresses and links and all that
Gotcha.
maintenance stuff. I don't think there's any major planned changes, although they have done them for us.
Right, but she
pretty
has
recently.
never seen the contract.
They do a good job. Any other comments or questions? We have a motion? Oh, sorry, do we have a vote? All in favor, say aye.
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 Okay, now we move on to old business. And we have a star here for budget priorities. Peter, do you want to explain what that star is for?
So at the last meeting, we talked about areas within the budget that where we might not be able to fund projects to save some money moving forward. And then I asked Olivia to do some analysis of that. And so I'm going to ask Olivia to take us through what she found and then answer the board's questions about where we can go with this. Okay, Olivia?
Yes.
Hold on, before we go, Olivia, I want to, as we said before, I want right into the mic so we can make sure we catch it.
Okay. Is that okay?
That's good.
Good. What I did was I sat with buildings and grounds and technology because.
I'm sorry, that's gotten, yeah, just pull it right in front.
Okay. What I did was I sat with
Thank you.
buildings and grounds as well as technology to review some of the big ticket items because that's the department that it came from. We're going to change the telephone system and switches within the technology department. Some of these projects we've already started. So it is very difficult to stop in the middle of the project.
Olivia, did we start that? We didn't start the phone project yet, though, right?
Oh yes, he's got purchase orders and they've started buying stuff.
Okay.
Yes. And then we look at the softball field. That is a big one. That has been going on for about a year now because it was in the 1920 budget. We did a couple of surveys. We paid architects to do work. And most importantly, we have a $250,000 grant that is attached to that particular project. If so, we are getting the project. If we get the grant, we are getting the project for half the cost. If we get the $250,000 grant, we started putting in the application. And I think if we stop in the middle, we will lose that grant as well. So this is something that I would not recommend we do. What I was looking at there is the 21st century furniture. Those we haven't purchased yet. And those furniture do not lend themselves very well to social distancing in the classroom. So I think those are some of the things that we can look at and not use and roll it back into other projects that we know we may need throughout the year, because all the things that we bought this year, maybe this is just the beginning. If schools have to close, we have to go back and we have to come back. They are constantly, and John Hall's department is constantly replenishing the PPEs that we have to buy. So the purchasing is going on all the time. Last 2 weeks when I spoke about the budget, I mentioned that I did not want to put a lot of pressure on this budget yet because I know it's coming. So these are some of the areas that we will get the money from to buy any additional supplies, because remember, we did the budget in October 2019, and we did not anticipate that we're going to be buying all these things that we are buying. So we have to plan ahead. We have to leave some room in the budget in case we need it going forward. There are some personnel positions that I have to discuss with the union also. We haven't hired them yet because some of them may be civil service positions that we have to talk about. So those are, executive session material because we have to talk with the union. So those are some of the areas that I will consider. I'll get some savings as we go along to get some savings to buy the PPEs that we constantly will need as this pandemic wreak havoc on all of us.
Thank you, Olivia. I think the reason they're having this conversation is because this PPE pandemic has wreaked havoc on our budget, our planning, and blown everything out of the water. Are there any questions or comments from trustees?
I have one.
Please.
What is the reality or the feasibility of implementing the student information management system this year? We had talked about it that last year and done an analysis and identified potential vendor for that. That may be something we want to look into with Mr. Contreras and Rob Dennis and see if that's something that we can do well during this transition period, unless we put it off to maybe the spring. But I think we did want a whole year's worth of a dual run. I mean, we may even be far, not even in the right frame of mind to do it this year.
You're right.
It wasn't an exorbitant amount, but it does take some personnel. It takes resources to do it well. So that might be something we put on the list of considerations to delay if we can.
Correct.
I think that cutover has already started, Lisa.
Has it really?
I think it has, because the planning was always to build Infinite Campus over the course of the 2021 school year and still run Power School.
Got you.
Right, so we would have Power School running all of this time while we were building, because you need one like totally souped up before you cut over. But I'll check with Elliot on that. I definitely want to talk some more about the phone system and see where those purchase orders are, because if we haven't had anything delivered yet, that's a big ticket item that we just may want to hold off a little bit on.
You really read my mind, because we had the discussion between looking for potential areas before approving this 2021 budget. We did discuss the student information system and we discussed the phone system. And one of the things that was said was that the student information system was near and dear and necessary.
It's absolutely necessary.
It's absolutely necessary, yes. And certainly from a parent and child usage perspective, we needed to go in a different direction. But that we did discuss that the phone system was something that, A, was less critical than the student information system, and B, it was something that we would be able to revisit before we went past the point of no return. And so it being early September, in the midst of everything going on, it is concerning that we're at a point of no return and didn't have a chance to discuss it, especially because we have in a row. So I would follow up on that request. I mean, you made the request or made the comment just now, so I feel like it's in good hands of letting us know specifically what we've done and how far we are. And with regarding the softball field, again, near and dear to my heart, but I do think that I'd like to find out and do more research about that grant specifically and be sure that if we didn't go ahead with this, we would lose that money. Because certainly in Construction Steering Committee, we have discussed several obstacles to proceeding with that, which I don't believe are resolved. So the idea that those are not resolved and we don't necessarily know exactly what we can do, and yet we can't stop it, again, that's a mismatch for me. So
Okay.
I really appreciate this information, Olivia, to set the path forward and let us know what we're doing. But I still would like some more information on those two specific projects.
Yes, and let me make a very good point about the telephone system. The
Yeah.
telephone system upgrade is also tied to the security upgrade in the bond. So we
Okay.
have to look at that piece, how the two tie together very carefully before we decide whether to pull back or not.
Okay. And I think there's different ways to pull back on things. If there are
Mhm.
material purchases that have to be there,
Mhm.
that can be done, but there are also labor expenses. There's also contracts and services and additional things that you can piecemeal things and postpone in a way that can, certainly from a cash flow perspective, but also from a budgetary expense,
Yeah. But
potentially
we
save
also
us.
have to be careful about, because when you are calculating the tax cap,
Mm-hmm.
you include the large capital project.
Sure, sure.
So how do you do it on the money end?
Mm-hmm.
That is very critical,
Mm-hmm.
because do you roll back the taxes? That's something we have to look at very well.
I had a
Yeah,
couple
please.
of questions. On the grant money,
Mhm.
when we had the grant for the char broilers and it
Mhm.
wasn't a feasible project to do, we were able to transfer the grant to the freezer that we put at the high school. Would it be possible, if it's not feasible to complete the softball field project this year, because there may be some obstacles to that? Could we possibly transfer that grant to a different capital project that we have in our queue?
We will try, because with the $50,000 for the child broiler, we had to go back to Disney, which
Right,
is the grant where we put that
right,
3 times,
I know.
and plead with them to roll it over into the high school fridge that we're going to have, the storage fridge that the food service department, we had to go back to them really 3 times. So I don't know whether, with all the limited funds that the state has, they'll give us the same flexibility. And we are talking about 250,000 versus 50,000. But we'll do our best to try.
That
The
is,
the first question goes to Assemblyman Levine, right? So when he secured that money for us, he wanted to make certain that it was going to go, that students were going to be the beneficiaries of the grant. So whatever project we would determine, because he would have to approve any change in the grant allocation. Which, if we had a good idea that benefited kids, I can't, I would imagine his office would be open to that. So we just would have to look at those projects and see what they are.
the word nimble is coming back to me, and
Yep.
knowing we have a willing partner in our assemblyman who wants to facilitate this should potentially grease the skids in a positive way on this.
Yeah, Chuck is a great guy and a good partner to us. We can have a conversation with him.
And my second point is, I think maybe we're looking at this the wrong way, looking at specific projects. I think we need to take a broader view, because as we were discussing before with LAC, there are going to be significant long-term financial impacts from this pandemic, from LIPA, from American Water, from cuts in state aid, all those things being rolled together. And I guess this is, just another opportunity to say this is probably a good time to pitch for the Budget and Finance Committee, which will come up on another agenda. But I think we really need to take a hard look at bigger projects and at curriculum and programs, and think about different ways to have our curriculum in a more cost-effective manner. Look at more maybe at the high school for options for students, because there are programs that don't run every year, and then there are classes that run with 5 or 6 kids in it. I know we've done work with local universities maybe more online universities, more online programs for our students, and looking at different options that may be much more cost effective to deliver the same projects for students. Looking at our foreign language program, what the enrollments are in the different languages, and maybe 5 languages may not be feasible with the upcoming enrollment, 5 choices. I mean, I really think we have to look at it more holistically than just specific projects this year. And then that's a much bigger discussion for another day. But I think we need to start thinking, because if we're going to make changes, we may have to make them this year so that we can have students complete programs, right? If we decide to change the way the curriculum is delivered. And I think we have to look at, the bond project, and, is all this work going to be feasible in this new sort of environment where we have these spaces that we may need to use our space differently based upon the pandemic, because this may not be the last time that we're faced with, God willing it may not be the last time we're faced with a coronavirus, just like the 21st century furniture, right? So, all the modernization of the buildings is more towards more open spaces. And that's really contrary to what, we're doing now, which is, dividing spaces and putting people further apart. So I think as we go through this pandemic and we see what the science is and what is coming in the future, we may have to do a larger reanalysis of what the bond projects are and what we want to do with them moving forward. Obviously, none of us have those answers tonight either, but just something to keep in mind.
Okay, thank you.
I was going to say,
Please.
the forward-looking piece is important. And I'm going to say, once again, it gets back to the ventilation. The investments in the ventilation pay off into the future. It's my silver lining.
Are there other new business topics?
That was old business, right?
Sorry, other old business, correct.
I have some questions.
Please.
I've got stuff. I can't tell if it's old or new. So when you get to the old/new,
I was thinking,
category,
I have one new, I was thinking ahead, but yeah.
I have the same. So I just want to follow up. Did the district, were they able to identify any opportunities for remote students to socialize back at school or in their own playgroup?
So we're getting started with the cohorts this week. The K1 class is tied to the Seacliff School. The 2-3 class is tied to the Glenwood Landing School, and the 4-5 class is tied to Seacliff. Glenhead, right, Chris? Glenhead?
That's right.
Glenhead. Yep. So we haven't sorted out at this point where people are going to mingle or get together. We just want to get started, keep the cohorts together, and then figure that out. So I think it is to come, but it's to come soon, but not imminently.
on the,
Okay, go ahead.
I was going to say on Andrew's point about these remote only groups. It sounds like the K1 remote groups are really large. Anecdotally, I don't know if this is the case, but like a remote teacher who has maybe, 28 K or first graders in the morning and an equally large group in the afternoon. Can you tell us how big those cohorts are and what's happening there? Because regardless of whether it's remote, it's sounds like it's a significant number of children to be concerned about.
Yep, the cohort groups, cohort groups are large. They range from 21 to 28, I believe, across the grade levels. And the teachers they're broken up into an AM session and a PM session by single grade. And we're working with the teachers on structuring that time so the synchronous and the asynchronous time lend themselves to smaller groups.
So if I'm a teacher teaching that K1 thing, how many kids in total am I responsible for in terms of like learning to read?
Over 40.
So there's 28 in
I
the morning?
suspect,
I'm sorry.
I think you guys are probably concerned about that and are thinking about that. You want to tell us?
Certainly we can talk, we can put something together for you, but the remote learning isn't going to look the same that the in-person looks. So it'll be structured differently. It's 2.5 hours of time that they have with their teacher, and they'll be getting their direct instruction both synchronously and asynchronously during that time period.
But there are, I just want to make sure I understand what Sarah said.
Yeah.
That's what didn't mean to interrupt you. That was my point. So they are having 40 kids in total, 20 in the morning and 20 in the afternoon
That's correct.
with one teacher.
I heard like one of either the K's and the ones was like there were 28 in the Zoom today.
But in fairness, they're only the teachers are only teaching the math and the literacy, so they're
Correct.
responsible for that.
That's right.
But I am very curious to see how these large classes play out on the elementary school level.
Yeah.
I have to imagine it's going to be difficult, and I'm wondering whether this is something that we should survey the parents within a couple of weeks, like 2 weeks, to see how it's going so that we can tweak any place we need to tweak. I don't think we want to wait too long to find out it's not going well.
You know, I just want to say that I had a conversation with an elementary school teacher who did remote learning the first time. She had a splendid class. She was teaching older students, third grade students, and she told me she never worked so hard, and it was so many hours because she and her co-teacher would break out the little groups to work with them individually, you know, to overcome whatever issues that they were having. So they would be working from like 8 in the morning to 8 at night doing this kind of work. And even if it's just math and reading, you're talking about kids who are learning to read for the first time. And not every student is ready to read in kindergarten.
Right.
You know, God bless Katie. I thought she was reading Anna Karenina in kindergarten, and I thought Michael would never learn to read. So, you know, I just think some kids are ready to read in kindergarten and some kids are not ready to read in kindergarten. And I think the state with this curriculum has placed this unfair and not even scientifically based criteria in forcing students in kindergarten to read who may not be developmentally ready to read and has nothing to do with intelligence. But I cannot imagine being a kindergarten teacher and trying to teach 40 kids who are at different stages developmentally to read, and then on top of it, doing it from a computer.
Yeah.
I find that very troubling.
20 and 20. It's still all
You're still
yours.
responsible. But what I'm
Yes,
saying is
That's
they
right.
may not be there just for the 2.5 hours, right? They may be,
Oh,
that
no, they're
doesn't
working.
even
Right.
lend itself to them breaking those students down into smaller group instruction, which I would think would be so important for K-1 students who can't even sit in a chair all day.
And this is just a resource issue. This is a board issue.
I don't know. I find it shocking that you told me that.
Yeah,
We-
well, right. I ran across it today, and the question is, right? The question is always what's the reality first, right? But it does sound like these are large cohorts, and it sounds like
I don't know. It sounds like Sister
we
Owen
value
Patrice's
the
back.
idea that teachers know each of these kids, both because of the social emotional aspect, but also because of learning to read, right? There's a lot that you need to know about individual children. And so
And
I've heard a lot of really wonderful things about remote only groups in different grades, but at that level, I'm concerned about the size.
Yeah, I wouldn't be concerned if you were talking about a high school level class, right?
Agreed.
Where they could do their own work. But I mean, and parents are working from home too. So
Yeah.
you don't even know what resources are available at home that can
Yes.
help, Susie Q and Joey with their reading. So to me, that's a very concerning number.
Starting with this, Peter, can we request that we get a very clear breakdown of each cohort size, K through
Sure.
5?
Remote and in person.
And how many of those are special ed students, please?
Sure.
Peter, do you share our concern here?
No, I mean, not yet, because we're just getting started.
So when's our next meeting?
I don't want to speak for the whole board. I mean, maybe everyone wants to weigh in because it is a serious resource issue, and making changes once classes get underway is a significant issue too, in terms of how classes are coming together and working with their teacher. But I'm very concerned about the size of those classes. I don't know if anybody else wants to speak to that.
Well, I guess my question is, Peter, are you surprised that there is surprise here? Or at least,
I mean, I thought I gave these numbers to you already, but clearly I hadn't.
We had gotten very preliminary numbers, and you were still going through the request for teachers for accommodations, and we knew the numbers were not necessarily aligning properly, but you were still working on it. So
No, I'm talking about the student numbers. I
we
thought I
had
had given,
breakdown.
You provided the numbers, but
Yeah.
I don't think we were aware that one teacher would be responsible for 2 grades.
You hadn't done the teacher assignments yet. The last
Not
meeting.
that or the size of the cohorts.
I think things were still fungible with
Right.
with ADA and the various permutations.
Right. I think it was just a matter that you weren't there yet.
There were a couple of things, the matching of the teachers who were remote. I will say, just in talking with the building secretaries over the last few days, a little bit of a rush of people to the remote program at the last minute, so that the numbers when we started the program were significantly lower. And I also did want to say, the teachers and I have been meeting every day, and they've been meeting with the directors, and we've been talking about how to manage the groups and best practices, and just being very conscientious of it. The parents as well, in the coffee talk meetings we had 2 days ago, we were open about the sizes and how we were watching them and monitoring them, and that we're going to continue to look at things.
So I guess the other issue I have is if everybody ends up going remote, then you have classes of 12 who are in a remote class,
Yeah.
and then a class of 28 that's
Right.
remote, which is unfair, right?
Yeah.
I don't know how you solve this. These are very complicated problems. But I think we should be on top of it.
And you can't just shift the kids around. You can't just say, oh, we're all remote, so, Jack and Jill go over to Miss So-and-so, and Bob and Judy go to someone else.
Not when they've
Right.
already established relationships.
Now they've already
That's-
established.
At
a
that age, we're
relationship.
talking about connection. We spend all the
This
time
is the
discussing
issue,
engagement
which makes
and
me feel the
You
sooner
just can't do
the
that.
better. But
So the
I don't know.
solution might be right? That you hire a second teacher for that one class so that they're able to do more breakout groups. So it's more like a co-teaching model, you might not need to do it for all 6 grades, right? Because there is, I think, one grade that's pretty small, the cohort. So, maybe it's only in 4 of those grades that something like that would need to be done.
Or a TA. You don't even have
Right.
to hire a full-time teacher. Because
Right.
if you had 28 kids in the class, you sure as heck would have a TA.
We have
Yes, we
It's
would
really
have.
K
not-
through 5.
We would have
We
had
haven't had
18,
it- we haven't had it.
22,
We would definitely be
24.
at 14.
Right.
214s.
So if you at least had a TA that could do some of the smaller group work and work, in a co-taught model with those students, I think that would be helpful because I know that worked well for this particular teacher that I was speaking to. Because obviously she was not a special ed teacher, but she was in the inclusion class teaching and she had a TA. And they alternated who was working with what group of students, right? So she
Yep.
would work with 5 students, the TA would work with 5 students, and then they'd flip.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
Peter,
they'd have a general, instructional class.
we haven't heard from all trustees. I think we're getting a pretty clear sense here that the board is open to additional staffing to alleviate a potential issue early.
Okay.
So I think we need that information and we need to be nimble in potentially addressing it.
All right, Chris and I'll talk about it.
Thank you. Andrew, you have more?
Yeah.
You have a list?
What is the status of the elementary instrument lessons? On the tour, I know we spoke a bunch about middle school and high school instruments. But what's the story with the elementary school? Will they be pulled out of general education? Is it going to be recorded? What's the plan?
So we've had a couple of conversations about that with Dahlia and the elementary principals. And so we started first at a place of looking at how asynchronous could work. And I think, after a few conversations, we realized that just wouldn't be ideal, especially for our youngest instrumental learners, especially 3rd graders who are taking formal instruction for the first time. So then we started gearing our conversation to how the in-person could work. The challenge is, keeping them cohorted while we're, and following those safety protocols and groupings. And so we're working on actually a more traditional pull-out instrumental approach like we used to use before the color teams. So, and what like most school districts usually do is they pull out by teacher, on a weekday model. So we're looking to how we could start that a few weeks in now. We had the last conversation we had was late last week. And because of the reopening, we agreed to not, we really need to see how the reopening went to make a final determination. But we're closer to an answer on that.
So if we are going to do that, so somebody sent me some great pictures of from the high school instrument PPE, which
Yes.
if you don't know what that is, you should Google it.
Dahlia has procured some of that.
It is
Yeah.
pretty amazing. So do we have that on order for the elementary schools? Because if we are going to start,
Yeah.
we need this stuff.
That's a great question. I'll follow up with Dahlia
Okay.
on that. I'm not sure. I know it's secondary.
She has it.
Okay.
Thank you. I won't return the flute.
Okay. Other old business.
Tell me when we're on the old new line.
Is there any other clearly old business? Are we ready to merge from blue to green before we hit yellow?
What would you consider committee, old or new?
I would consider committee old. If it's a pre-existing committee,
Yes. When do we think we might start those up again? Maybe October? Safety, security, wellness.
ad
is a
hoc
good question.
superintendent evaluation.
A medium intern.
Those-
I'm
those
piggybacking
in that
Lisa.
order,
That was one of
maybe.
mine.
Yeah.
I think we should start them. I mean, it's not up to me, but I would recommend
Right.
sooner rather than later. And then if we want to give ourselves through September to really just focus on this,
Yeah.
then October 1, I think we should be hitting the ground running with starting to schedule these things. I mean, construction steering,
It's ongoing.
it's on, it never ends. We're meeting on Tuesday.
Do we not, there's no district safety meeting set up because that seems relevant? Yes.
And LAC is on
Wellness
schedule to
as
be,
well,
to be
I'm not saying
proceeding.
no.
I mean, the chair people of those committees don't, they don't report to you and me, but
Right.
I'm just.
Yes, Jen is
in
going
terms
to,
of their
is willing to step up. to-
relevance
to-
right
to
now.
chair, correct.
Right, those should start.
Yes. And she texted me, but I'm gonna, I guess we'll connect.
Okay.
All right, so Peter, we'll start getting those on the calendar starting in
October.
Okay. And Tim, you can work about the LAC scheduling as well, because that coordinates usually with Betty, right?
I think so. Like tangentially, right, Betty?
Okay.
We'll sort it out.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Very well. Very well. Okay. Other. Yeah.
Possibly on old, do we have updated enrollment figures? I see constant craziness in the housing market.
I get them after the first day of school. I'll send them home this week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are you thinking the grid, that wonderful grid we always get of enrollment numbers of?
I
I
am.
love.
Yeah.
I love the grid
We
is
love
good.
the grid.
Mhm. I
And
could
this
grid better.
grid,
Yeah, the last time, we saw kindergarten was one thing, but traditionally we get upticks throughout elementary school. So it'd be interesting to see where we are. And now it's not merely academic, right? You've got to give every kid 6 feet. It feels
Critical.
very fraught.
Okay. Old to new business.
New business.
Yes, please.
Okay. So, we post our minutes on the website. We post LAC's minutes on the website. LAC posts them. But we don't post the construction steering committee minutes. And I was wondering why we don't, and if we should consider posting them, especially since we're in the midst of a bond project.
I'm all for it. I
I'm
think
all
it's a
for it.
public meeting. I don't see why
Yep.
we wouldn't. They exist.
They should be posted.
They should be posted. I don't know if we have to have a more formal discussion of this on a future agenda, or if it's sufficient for us to say,
Peter?
public meeting, the minutes exist.
I think we can just do it.
Thank you.
I think we can just do it.
I think it's the right thing to do. We'll probably clean up some of those lines that haven't been active since 2016. But
I think John was in the middle of cleaning up the, because there were actually a lot of projects before you and Sarah came on that were being cleaned up from the prior bond.
Mhm.
So I think he was taking it off. And the only thing that we would have to be careful of would be if there's anything that's attorney-client privilege. So
Yep.
they should be reviewed prior to being posted.
yes.
That's
Yeah.
all I would say,
Okay.
Yep.
But you're right. Sometimes we do. That's a good point.
right? So that would be the only thing I would say.
Construction does overlap with litigation,
Litigation.
unfortunately.
In some instances.
In some instances,
Sad, but
but at least
true.
once every meeting.
At least one, yes.
Any other new business?
I have a
Yeah.
question.
There-
Sure. We'll go with McCary first.
Oh, thank you. Okay. What is the district's approach to homework this year? So, we have the homework policy. This seems like a very good year to make sure that we implement it properly. I'm particularly concerned about the high school students who are going to be on screens for 60% of their high school experience. I worry about them having a lot of homework, which will require them to be on screens after the end of the school day. They're also not socializing with their friends during the day. So I worry, that's a lot of missed socialization. And the impact of a heavy homework schedule on them concerns me, as well as, of course, the elementary school students. where we know homework is just not that effective at that age. So I just wanted to mention that, make sure we're sort of on top of it, see what everyone's thoughts are about it.
Because even several years, so before you were here, Andrew, we've had students come to board meetings, like, juniors and seniors, to talk about how incredibly difficult the homework load is. And this feels like it really doubles down on that situation.
Well, I think part of the problem at the high school level is that they operate in silos, right? So if we could just get like that Google Calendar up so that we have our testing, or do what Tim suggested, like they do in Great Neck, have testing days. Hopefully with some new leadership, they'll be working towards working more in teams. I think, like at the middle school, they definitely work as teams, and those team meetings help. And it's even built into this modified schedule. And at the high school, you tend to have department meetings. So the department can function one way, but if I'm a student, I'm taking English, math, science, a business course, none of that gets coordinated is really, I think, a big part of the issue at the high school. And I also think that IB program is a huge part of the problem as well.
I mean, I think we've heard from a lot of kids that just like the overall workload, like every single day, is massive. And it's one thing if at least you got to go in and see some people and then you come home to it. It's still tough.
Peter-
to say.
I think it's important with the fact that they don't have athletics at the moment. So even just to get their sensory input and get away from that screen, or their instruments, or their art, or their extracurriculars or robotics, for them to go from screen to screen to screen.
Right,
It's
like the
not
idea of like you're watching, if it's your virtual day and you're in high school, you're watching 40-minute recorded videos of every single class you had that day, which might be every single period. And then you're still going to do homework, right? This is all just sitting in your room or wherever.
But they do have to do homework. I mean, I listen. They
I'm
cannot.
not
they
saying
cannot-
no
they
homework.
cannot
I'm
master-
saying
they cannot master
how many hours?
an advanced college level course without doing homework.
No one has suggested. I really don't think anyone suggested otherwise.
I'm not anti-homework on the high
So
school
let's
level.
come back to the
I think
original
that's
question
the
that
issue.
Andrea asked, which what is the district's policy to homework this year? Is it a fair characterization that within the confines of a new model, we are generally adhering to the one that was enacted about a year ago?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We'll put together something more comprehensive for the board to give you a sense of what the approach is on this.
I would love that, because there's the sedentary nature, right, of just they're going to be not moving physically because they're tied to the screen, which concerns me. And also I guess like some people would think, well, right, if you're at home and you're on a bell-to-bell schedule, it's equivalent to being at school, but it's not, because as we all know, everybody who's done meetings through Zoom, it's not the same experience. It is much more, produces a lot more fatigue than being in person with somebody. So it's not the equivalent school experience from that perspective.
I agree, it's different, but I think it's starting with a baseline of knowing where we are as an informational starting point, I think would be a good launching point.
Let's start there, because I think it is true that like even if you're in school, if you're confined to your specific space and you've got your shield, it is more social than doing that in your kitchen, but still, there is a level of stress.
No, that's all true. I just think that we have to be realistic. That if you're taking college level courses at the high school, that inherently whether it's AP or IB or whatever, there's a significant amount of homework that goes with it. And these kids, I watched my son do it for college this year. He was working hours and hours and hours in his room, coming down for meals, and it's tough.
But it's not
Much
equivalent.
harder. Much harder.
Absolutely.
Right.
And I think we're all with you on that. Like this
Yeah.
idea of like, we need to be realistic. And we can be realistic on both sides, right?
Right,
Both
and
about like how much homework is required, but then you can also decide, you can look at it either way. Like if the homework is X, do you want to look at what their day is like? Or if the day is like Y, do you want to look at what the homework's like? But you've got to think about the kids' entire experience, right? To your point.
I don't think we're disagreeing.
Other new business.
Sure. Could we get signage outside, Peter, to remind anyone stepping onto school grounds that we require a mask and 6 feet at all times?
Yeah, let's see why not.
I think today obviously had special qualities as the first day of school, but I think we want everyone coming onto school grounds to know what standards are. Could you go ahead?
I said yes.
Thank you. Could you tell us where we are with the health screenings?
What do you mean?
The app.
The app?
Are we screening everyone coming into our buildings every day for the questions outlined in the theoretical health screening app?
Yes, we are. Everybody's supposed to take the app before they get to school in the morning, and then we're temperature screening everybody once they come in.
The app does not work.
I understand that. We're working on it.
Meanwhile, we're working on it, but to some extent, the company behind the software has to work on it. So I know there was an email, at least to some students at the middle school, about like using a paper form. But it seems pretty clear to me that we really want to know if anyone's waiting on a test result or travel to a quarantine state. We don't have actual testing for many reasons, and so this is our proxy for that, is these screening questions. What can we do?
Well, I wasn't there today, so I have to check in with on how that arrival went. I can get back to you on that. Because I don't even know what the full range of the issues. I know that there are issues with the app, but I would need to speak with the principals and the nurses to get a better sense of what went on today. And I didn't have that conversation.
We did not screen a significant portion of the population at all in any way.
And certainly nobody was turned away.
No. Well, you tell me. I honestly, there was some risk scanning.
Was it? So let me ask the question. Let me turn it around. Was anyone turned away?
Was anyone turned away?
There-
The risk scan or if they did get the app to work.
Some folks did get the app through.
A good portion did. We did have a good portion as well that had issues.
Do you know
Mr.
what
K.
percent?
Mr. K received Elliot received a large number of emails, hundreds of emails. So, but we did a few students did go home today with symptoms, just headaches, things like that. Following protocol.
Heat exhaustion. Yeah.
Just following protocol on that.
Was anyone turned away from the risk scan?
I'd have to ask the principals. I don't believe so, because that would have been communicated. I spoke with Jean and the middle school nurses about those situations where students were sent home.
And nobody was turned away for not properly filling out the information. in
I can
advance.
guarantee that's true.
That is correct. Okay, so you guys give us some
Um,
data on that as well.
I know it's late. But the idea that people returned from quarantine states 2 days ago or could be waiting on a test result and are coming to school is deeply problematic, right? We can solve this in a low-tech way. We do not know when the situation with the app will be fixed. We are entirely dependent on either that company fixing it, which we can't, I mean, we can cajole them, but we can't control it, or finding another technology solution or finding a low-tech solution. But this is something we are required to do, and it's important to do, and we are not doing it.
So Sarah, it would be easy, right, to send home tonight an email with a copy of the questions, like what we did to come in today, and to just tell the students the app is malfunctioning for some people. If you're not able to log in, please fill this out, and when your child walks in, hand the form to the person who's standing with the temperature.
And someone's got,
Because it's a
So look at
liability
it.
issue too, right?
I think the issue is that this is a crucial part of this entire formula. And if it's not happening, it has to happen. So, and it's not, it doesn't have to start happening September 23rd. Like, I get tomorrow maybe, but Monday, September 14th, it's got to be in place.
100%, one way or the other. I'm agnostic on the systems. I mean, the app would obviously have, the app sounded great, right? You leverage the fact you need the concussion management anyway. You leverage the fact that it compiles the data and makes it easy to deal with if there are exceptions, but
Do a Google survey. There's a lot of different
it's
ways
not
to do
working.
this.
Right. We've got to have a way to do it. We don't have testing. This is literally all that we have. I mean, schools reopen because infection rates are very low, but they're absolutely not zero.
And we all know how to make it go big, which is to not follow these things.
Yeah.
And you know what? To be honest, we should have it in place because the app's gonna, even if it works tomorrow, it's gonna go down again at some point. So we need
That's
a
fair.
contingency plan.
A backup.
Okay. Exclamation point on that one. What else you got, Sarah?
We have to make sure kids get outside. It has to be absolutely a guaranteed experience. With the ventilation that we have right now, it is still, even with mask on all the time, there's no guarantee that it's safe to be inside for 6.5 hours or 5.5 hours or even 4 hours. We need to be certain that every kid is getting outside for a significant period of time. We need to wear masks inside. We need to eat outside. If that's not going to be possible in a day, we do need to talk about these ideas that, like, of having a high heat day or a thunderstorm day that we can switch to remote. And the other reason is because the virus is airborne and it can linger in the air for a long time, kids can't take their mask off. Because masks aren't 100% efficient, if you're in the room for hours and hours, the virus starts to build up in the air. So it's important for the kids to get outside, but it is also important for the room to be empty so that our ventilation systems have the hour in the middle of the day to clear the air. Could it take longer than that because of obstacles like desk shields, et cetera? It's possible. But at minimum, you need that. More outside is better. That's where the science is now. It's unfortunate that the science wasn't there at the beginning of the summer, but that's where we are now. And so we need to get to the point where we can come to this meeting and we can be told, like, yes, kids were not sitting in a class with the same cohort where someone may or may not be infectious for more than 4 hours. Like, we need to know that.
I have one other. You're done. I agree. We haven't really spoken much about the cleaning procedures. So I'm just curious, how are the classrooms being cleaned? How are the buses being cleaned? Are they being fogged every night? What types of materials are being used? I'm just curious.
Okay. I'll have John put all that together. We'll get that home to you.
I'll add to that because, unfortunately, there are downsides to cleaning also, right? And so we're very fortunate that our custodial staff is so diligent about how these products are used, right? Like John Hall clearly has a very specific knowledge of how to use things, how long they need to sit, how long it takes for them to work, how long it takes before it's safe for people to have contact with them again. But, the more people look at indoor air quality, the more people become concerned about things like foggers, right? That you use foggers to like kill a lot of germs on surfaces that you may not be able to get to. But if you're poisoning the air, you're creating other kinds of issues too. So I think there's really an issue about when and how often those kinds of materials are used.
Right, and the idea, if you're, COVID's not killed by all cleaners, right? It has to be a very strong material. So if you're going in and fogging a classroom, and then the children are eating lunch and snack on that desk, what type of contamination are they now ingesting? So, that speaks to outdoor meals, but also it might be just a simple solution of they eat with a placemat or they eat with a towel, or, I just want to make sure that we're considering.
Right. It's like the idea with everything. It's something that can kill a virus. It's inherently toxic.
So we need umbrellas, galoshes, snow boots, tablecloths, maybe some candles.
We already got those emails.
Candles.
We're to bring
It sounds
umbrellas
nice.
and beach chairs
That's it.
to school. We got that. I'm down with it. I got my umbrella.
Other new business.
I have a quick question.
Sure, Trustee Vizzo.
It may not be as usual in our district as others, but did we get any very, very late minute registrations? Like, did any new students show up on our doorstep today that we didn't know about?
I don't know.
It's happening pretty much every day. And just talking about the enrollment, the registrar walks in and I ask her, what's the new number? Because it's happening pretty much every single day.
But like, did any?
From yesterday to today, I think we
Yesterday
got
to
about 5 more.
Okay.
But she's doing her very best. She's meeting with them. Sometimes it's just the paperwork. It does take time.
We're a welcoming place. People who are appropriately living here, come join us.
Let's end on a high note. I don't know if everyone's done, but I just want to thank everyone who extended recess and who was part of that. Even though it's just a few minutes longer, I know the children will really appreciate that. And many, many parents have wanted that. They would take any extra minutes. So thank you for that.
And thank you for opening our schools today. Like, every single child, K through 8, got to go to school today, right? It is a tremendous, tremendous victory.
Is there any other order of business, or do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second.
Okay.
But give me a minute. I can.
All in favor of adjournment?
All right.
Aye. All right. Good night, everyone. Thank you.
Good night, everyone.
Feel better.
Thanks.